Hello, Blenders, and welcome to episode number 143 of ReelBlend, a podcast that is recorded live on location from the Four Seasons Total Landscaping in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. On this week's show,
all the networks.
We've always been broadcasting from there, though.
We are the official podcast.
Okay.
And now there are other people around here for some
Four
reason.
Seasons Total Landscaping. Netflix is going to be testing a linear channel feature for all of our French listeners. Quick Mank reviews and also Hillbilly Elegy. A lot of stuff that's coming to theaters in limited release, and the Nelms brothers. Oh my gosh, this is such a great interview. When we get to this later in the show, the Nelms brothers have directed a holiday film for the family called Fatman, starring Mel Gibson, and it's fantastic. We're going to get into that later on in the show. My name is Sean O'Connell, and I'm joined each week by Jake Hamilton of Fox 32 in Chicago. Hi, Jakey. How are you?
Hey, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm really excited because we have a lot of good things to get to this week, and including Kevin McCarthy of Fox 5 in Washington, D.C. Hi, Kev.
Hello, Sean, Gabe, Jacob. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing wonderful.
Kevin?
Let's get to some housekeeping. If you're watching us on YouTube,
Gabriel?
Thank you very much for joining us. You get to see Kevin in his Zack Snyder's Justice League sweatshirt. They're going to put more of those on sale, by the way, through the Ink to the People, which is a site that raises money for charities, all different types of charities. And the Zack Snyder merchandise goes to, of course, suicide prevention. So we thank everybody who picks up one of those sweatshirts. But those are super comfortable, and I love them so much. I'm probably going to grab another one, too, because I wear mine a ton.
Wasn't it like $15 or something? I'm trying to remember. I mean, this is not an ad. We're not trying to sell. I just remember being relatively inexpensive.
I think it was closer to like $60-something.
Wait.
If I remember correctly. Yeah.
I don't know why.
It wasn't 15.
Why did I think? Oh, it might have been like a donation thing. I don't remember now. I remember it being. No, what was 15 was the hat.
That's what it was.
That's what was 15 was the JL hat you sent me. Okay. Sorry.
Anywho, if you're watching us on YouTube, we thank you guys. Go hit subscribe, turn on your notifications. If you're listening to us where you get your podcast needs, check the show notes. And there's a link to take you over to our YouTube channels where you can subscribe and follow us to watch us on a weekly basis. Because
the
sometimes
YouTube videos
we have
always
really cool elements.
They always remind me of the YouTube videos that, like, sometimes I react to things that you say, and I don't realize really that I'm reacting to them.
Like
and
the Ryan Johnson Star Wars thing?
Yeah.
Did you see that?
I saw that.
But that's fine, though, because that means that you're engaged in the show and you are listening to everything that I'm saying.
As opposed to, when the Astros were in the playoffs and you were talking, and I was sitting here going,
Right, exactly. At least that didn't last very long, though. So, weekly poll. So, who recommended this one? The best movie released to streaming so far this year has been, who was that, Jakey? Yeah, that's what I thought. Oh, look at your Astros mug. Very nice. Okay, here are your choices. I'm going to throw it to Jake.
Drinking the tears of everyone who lost.
I didn't realize that was a mug. I thought that was an Astros trash can. My bad.
No, it's filled with the tears of everyone that lost in 2017.
Come on now. This was your weekly poll. What is the best film released? We're about to get overwhelmed with streaming options coming, whether it be things like David Fincher's film Mank or Ron Howard's Hillbilly Elegy. So we figured we'd take a sample and see where we are so far in 2020 and discuss the films, the best films that we thought have come to streaming so far. Now, I gave you 3, and then I asked for other, and a bunch of others came in. Gabe, you didn't happen to look at the others, did you? Because I know one that stood out.
I'll pull it up while you're letting them know.
Okay, so Jake, of the ones that I gave, Palm Springs, The Trial of the Chicago 7, and Hubie Halloween, which one do you think?
Wait, Hubie was on there?
Why did you put Hubie on there?
Yes.
Why did you put Hubie on there?
Kevin, why did I put Hubie on there?
Because it's awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I mean, we jokingly say it's awesome. I do like Hubie.
I don't think you jokingly said it.
I like Hubie.
I put Hubie on there. This is what made me feel really bad. I put Hubie on there as a joke, as like a running joke for the show, right? For the show, because we're always talking about Hubie Halloween. And then underneath, a bunch of people were like, "The Five Bloods," and I was like, "Oh yeah. All right."
Your joke meant that the winner probably got excluded.
I probably should have put Spike Lee on there.
Yeah.
Sean, in all honesty, settle this before Jake answers this question. I know we joke about Hubie Halloween. You actually enjoyed Hubie Halloween.
Yes, I gave Hubie Halloween 2.5 out of 5.
Oh, it doesn't sound like you enjoyed it too much.
Listen, it should have been a lot worse. I've given most of Sandler's other films a lot less than that.
2.5 is 50%. It's like an F.
Yes, but graded on a curve. I laughed more than I thought I was going to. So, Jake, of Palm Springs and Trial of the Chicago 7, which one do you think prevailed on
I would say
poll?
probably Chicago 7. I feel like still not that many people have seen Palm Springs, or not enough people have seen Palm Springs.
So Trial got 41%.
Sure.
Palm Springs got 36, so close enough. And then other, I said, tell us. And we got a lot of people who said Spike Lee. Any others that you saw in there that stood out?
King of Staten Island got some mentions.
Okay.
When it comes down to the end of the year, are we counting Hamilton for top 10s? I don't think so.
My opinion on that is swung. When I watched it and I loved it, and I thought like, oh, that'll totally make my top 10 because it's one of the 10 best things I've seen this year. I don't think it's a movie. I think we've discussed this before on the show, and I don't think it's a movie.
I know we had the discussion of like, is it a movie? Is it not a movie? But I don't think we've had it in the context of now that we're slowly kind of starting to build our top 10. I know the Academy's doing something different. My top 10 stops on December 31st. So I was trying to decide if we were going to put Hamilton on there because I was looking at what my list is so far, and it's thin, baby.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think that you're not violating any. Not that these things matter anyway. If you're going to put Hamilton on your top 10 and you can defend it, fine. That's fine. Sure. Right? But
it's funny because like I would honestly initially I would say Hamilton doesn't count. But if you think about it, there's lots of films that are shot in the year the movie doesn't come out. Obviously, it was shot in 2016. But I would argue that the film version of the musical that I saw on Broadway and Jake, you saw in Chicago, it's a different interpretation. It's almost like an adaptation of what the play or the musical was, like because of the way it designs its shots and chooses what to focus on. That's the only way I could see people making an argument that it's a movie, because it's no longer letting you be like the God's eye where you're essentially like looking and choosing what to edit and what scenes to look at. The movie is telling you what story it wants to tell you specifically through camera lenses and close-ups. So I feel like it's a divide there that I think is interesting. I think you could argue either way because I think, and Jake, I don't know how you feel, the film hit me differently emotionally than the musical did. Only because I was told what to look at and told what to think. So if anything, isn't that kind of what a movie is? A movie is the director's choices and the shots and the emotions and the manipulations of those emotions. But again, I could also see the complete other side of it and say, oh, it's not a movie. It's just a production of the musical that was already done on Broadway. There weren't scenes set up that were different from the play. So
can you argue it's a documentary? Would it fall under the parameters of a documentary?
No, a doc would be about the production of Hamilton.
Like if Hamilton's America, which they did on PBS. Yeah. Like which is great if you've never seen.
If you were backstage with like Lin-Manuel before the show, and that would have actually been an interesting a way to play with it. Intercut a documentary into the musical. I keep calling it play, but
it was already like 3 hours long. I think it's going to come down to like how thin is my top 10 at the end of the year.
But have you guys put it on recently? We were raving about Hamilton. Have you watched it recently?
It's great.
It's just there. I'm just curious if you guys have thrown it on.
I have not.
Yeah, I haven't either, but I loved it. I would like to see it again. What's up, Gabe?
Can I throw a hypothetical that I don't think is relevant, but maybe it makes this more interesting?
Sure.
What if Hamilton, instead of being Hamilton as we know it, what if it were an indie movie by some first-time director who made a low budget? It's Hamilton. It's as prolific as you think it is as far as the content. But they said, we're just going to get a stage and we're going to shoot it this way so that I can afford to make my movie. Would you guys be more quickly to champion it as a film?
No.
The musical never happened on Broadway and just the movie?
Hypothetically speaking, let's just say like the reason it's shot this way is because like an artist wanted to make it within this budget.
Yeah, I mean, if
would you be more
the
reticent to say
intent,
it's a film?
Sure. I think intent
Its problem
matters.
is the shadow of the Broadway.
Yeah, in the same way that like if a movie comes to it airs on HBO, I'm still not going to put it on my final top 10 list because it was made for television. Like the intent was, just like Kill Bill was made as one film. Therefore, it's intent matters.
But that's where it gets
right,
dicey. It is intent does matter, but then it gets dicey in that regard, right? With because we've had this discussion before about Netflix and HBO and Netflix and who if a movie's made for HBO, but if a movie's made for Netflix, but it gets a theatrical run. Now, if HBO starts making films that get theatrical runs for a week or two, would you start putting those in?
Yeah, because then they're a studio just like any other studio.
But wait a second. Hamilton was supposed to have a theatrical release.
Exactly. So Hamilton falls under the umbrella of like, but I think it's for me it's less about the theatrical aspect of it, and more about the fact that they're just recording something that happened on stage.
Isn't this a null point though? Didn't the Academy already say that Hamilton isn't going to be able to participate in the Oscars? And
correct.
So this is just more.
I mean, I don't always go by the because the Academy's their season's going through February. I don't know what you guys are doing. I'm stopping my top 10 on December 31st. So I'm already doing different things that the Academy's doing.
I'll join you on that.
I pick good movies for best film of the year. They pick.
I don't think anything that they thought was going to come out in January or February is actually now coming out in January.
You're absolutely right. So they ended up like screwing things over for no reason because they thought and granted, none of us knew what was going to happen when they made that call. But they really thought that like by extending it to February, we would still get West Side Story.
Mm-hmm. What happens if Cherry is phenomenal and Tom Holland delivers one of the best performances ever? Would you not consider that as your and part of your?
I feel like if Cherry were, I don't know, I just feel like we would have heard something by now. Is there any part of like usually studios know what they have. Like we were just talking about how the fact that you guys have already seen a movie that doesn't come out till Christmas. And it's because they know that it's good. Like studios know. I mean, how many times have we done junkets for movies that doesn't come out for 2 months? It's because they know what they have.
And if Cherry is terrific, it'll make my top 10 for 2021.
Interesting. So do we want to make a statement now as a show that our top 10s?
I figured that was assued. Yeah.
12,
our top 10 of the year.
2020 came out this year. Yeah.
All right, I'll jump on that.
Let's move to 2021. All right, let's move to our interview for this week. The Nelms brothers have joined forces to create a holiday movie that is, honestly, I kid you not, going to become a tradition around the O'Connell family household. We're going to watch this together once a year because it just makes me feel warm and special about the season. This is Fatman, and this is the Nelms brothers discussing their Mel Gibson collaboration on the ReelBlend podcast. I would love to start at someplace kind of strange. I really left the movie wanting to taste one of Mrs. Claus's cookies. I would assume they are the most delicious, perfect cookies. Can you please just talk about choosing what you showed for Mrs. Claus? Because when he grabbed one and ran, I identified with him so closely in that moment.
I'll say the funniest thing about that is like I believe one of the producers had a friend who was making these cookies, and she is a baker, and that's what she does. She runs this bakery or these cookies, and that's one of the things she does is these specialty Christmas cookies. And they look so good. Everybody was jonesing to eat those damn things. Mel was putting them down. But yeah, we were, because he had to. I mean, every scene,
he's always taking it for the team,
Yeah, trying to get exactly. So yeah, it was. I think they were pretty good, man, because everybody was trying to snag them all the time.
And that moment that you referred to was, Mel came up with that on the day.
Did he really?
Yeah,
it's so funny.
Where he's in the factory and he steals one, and she's like,
"Oh yeah, that was on the day. That was on the day."
Can you explain how that happens? Like when something like that comes up on the day, do you have to redesign your day? Like he says, "Okay, I'm going to do this in the shot," or was it part of the shot already? It just kind of improv the moment.
So that moment right there. Yeah, that moment right there is something that you don't have to reblock anything or reconceive, because it's such a little nuance in there. And he's like, "Oh, I'm just going to grab this and dart across the factory floor." And obviously, Marianne is just plays off of him. She's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And he's not supposed to be stitching cookies. Maybe she's got him watching his waistline or something.
And I mean, for the most part, he doesn't tell you he's going to do it. You see him like kind of like Mel's like just turning on the scene as you're going through it, and maybe like on the second take he'll try something like that, or if he has it early on he'll try something like that. But yeah, it wasn't in the script. He tried it, I think, second take, And it was hilarious because I don't know if that's the one we used, but we either used second or third take. But yeah, it created a certain amount of warmth and energy and goofiness at the end of the scene, which was great.
There's a moment
he
too.
and Marianne, they did a ton of those little improvisational bits at the end of the scenes.
There's a moment with the
there's
cookies.
A bunch of them, and honestly, Mel would always throw like little nuggets at us.
It's a moment with the cookies that was such a throwback to me. So obviously I grew up on the Lethal Weapon franchise and I adored it. And I think in the second one, he was trying to quit smoking and he was eating dog biscuits. And he's driving in the truck and he's got the cookie wedged in his mouth. And I was like, it's just a throwback to my youth for some reason. Watching it with that cookie. So it's great.
We're big Lethal Weapon fans as well. Man, I can't remember the dog biscuit thing. I need to watch 2 again then.
He was going to quit smoking, and then Murtaugh gave him dog biscuits to chew on because he needed some sort of oral fixation sort of thing. I'm pretty sure it was the second one.
It's the one with the international immunity, right?
Yes, diplomatic immunity.
Immunity.
I want to ask you both about title. This is such a great title, Fatman. It's simple, it's effective, it gets the job done. And I just wonder, when you come across that title, was that initially what you wanted to call the film? Was there any pushback of calling the movie that? Because in my opinion, it makes the film more intriguing. Like, if I see a title, like I was upstairs earlier, my wife had some friends over, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm interviewing the directors of Fatman." They're like, "Fatman? What the heck is that?" But they were wondering it from a perspective of like, "Oh, I want to see that. What kind of title is that?" So I wonder, like, can you talk about the title process and whether or not you got pushback specifically, because it is so like just direct.
Kind of in your face a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a few little tidbits on that title, actually. I mean, like, I think why we like it is it sounds kind of badass in our minds. And it turns this like Santa Claus into Fat Man, like taking the Fat Man, like a fucking badass. And you're like, oh wow, there might be something dark or badass about this guy rather than just being like this altruistic, jolly guy who eats cookies. So that is why it's titled that, is because, and also it's used as a derogatory term towards him when the bad guys start coming after him, and when the kid is like, you fat man, like it's very derogatory and badass at the same time. So we kind of liked it.
There's also there is it's a little edgy. We like that about it. It's not it pushes it a little bit. And was there questions about, is that the best title? Absolutely. But Ian and I were passionate about it, and everyone backed our play when we were like, I think it rings for us.
And maybe the craziest thing about the title is that is not what it was titled when we first wrote it. That was in the title, but it was not the title. The title we had when we first wrote it was The Kid, the Stick, and the Fat Man. And it was basically our affinity for the good, the bad, and the ugly that we were talking.
And we had a manager back in the day, and she was like,
a very smart manager.
Yeah, and she was like, you guys should just call it Fat Man. And when the title hits you, it hits you, right?
Yeah.
You're just like, that's it.
Yeah, it's like you get punched in the face with the title. Like the title punches you in the face. It's like, I want to see Fat Man because the name, like without even knowing who's in it, what it is, it's the title that sold me, to be honest with you.
Funny. And it looks weirdly good on a poster too. Like I didn't expect Fat Man to look so good, as good as it does on the poster, but it looks really good.
Nicely, it does, man.
I want to talk about sort of the mythology that you guys had to create for this story, and sort of this idea that really, if you wanted to, there are prequels to be made, and it's sort of like really kind of very heavily hints of things that have happened in the past, and I'm just sort of curious, just creatively, to have fun. Did you guys sort of ever just kind of start imagining like different adventures or other sort of like mythological stories that have happened leading up to these moments?
Certainly.
That's awesome. Yes. The first thing we did was the first incarnation of this was actually 2 short stories. We came up with the idea, and then we were like, oh, hey, I'm going to write this short story. And he was like, I'm going to write this short story. And we both have these diverging, there was the same mythology, same guy. One was way in the past and one was current. And we wrote these 2 stories, and then we sort of passed it to each other and read it. And we were laughing, and we were just like, and I remember Esh going, well, shit, we can never make this one in the past. Like, this one's fucking crazy.
It's period, yeah.
It's period. It's fucking nuts. It's about his origin, and it's fun. But it was also like outside of what we thought was realistic at the time. And so we ran with his version, which was the more
became our version.
Right. It ends up being our version, but it was an impetus off of a short story, 2 short stories, and we went with the one that was more up to date.
And then like we ended up having to make all kinds of rules for Chris's, like the Kris Kringle universe.
And way more rules than we thought we were going to have to make up, because it's like we came up with the concept. We wrote these like 20-page short stories, and then all of a sudden it fucking gets into we decided to write it into a full screenplay, and we're just like, oh fuck, like when does the kid get presents? When, how does Chris know, and how can he tell, and how does his mojo work? Like how do we do that? And like,
so we like aged the kid. We're like, okay, the rule, and there's like a Word doc of all these rules, but like the rule on the kid is that you do not get presents after 12 years old. So once you become a teenager, you age out, because we were like, there's no way, 50-year-old people are getting presents still.
And even though it wasn't mentioned in the movie, it was just a ton of rules, probably about 20 rules that we just needed to have down so that when we were writing it, we weren't breaking them.
It's almost like writing about time travel. Like once that snowball starts rolling down the hill, you got to start like filling in all the holes that are raised by questions.
Yes. Yeah, it felt like that. And a lot of time we would, trip on ourselves or stumble and be like, fuck, go back, and then go back and write it back up, and be like, shit.
Yeah, I mean, you get like the rule about him being able to, get the download of someone, right? So he has to be consciously thinking of you to bring that download.
Whether he sees you, whether he sees your name, or whether he's like, oh, hey, Bill. Okay, great, Bill. Yes. Oh, yeah, he was good this year. He's got a da-da-da.
Otherwise, he's just overwhelmed with a cacophony of information and voices.
It's just too unrealistic that he could manage a billion voices in this thing.
Be a schizophrenic.
Yeah.
No, but I love that element whenever he comes in contact with somebody and then starts to talk back about the things that he knows about them and has known about them for all this time, was such a fun element to it. So
it was fun to see the actors play off of that, because a lot of times it's because you don't really know what he's asking them or what he's referring to, but like they had a lot of fun building their backstory, the actors that were playing off of him, and like understanding what he was referencing when they're like, oh shit, like he knows about the whatever,
Like Mel would like walk around and randomly like say shit to the military guys. Like, oh hey Bill, yep, not all of it made it in the film, but it was funny.
So the way that they're sort of selling you guys, the brothers, are these DIY filmmakers, and I think it's great that you're getting these opportunities to make the stories you want to make. And so for this reason, I want to take you back. I want you to take us back to the day that you find out that Mel Gibson is agreeing to be part of the film.
Oh man, that's
such a great day.
that was a pretty wild one. I mean, first of all, I don't know if you're but like Ian and I went to a screening of Hacksaw Ridge, and
how great is that movie, by the way? That movie is awesome. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah.
No, and honestly, like like there was things that we talked about with Mel about that movie, and many others that he was so generous with his insight. But we go to see Hacksaw Ridge, and he's doing a Q&A afterwards, and he's there with that beautiful feral beard, and he looks like this is he's just finished the film, he's on the publicity tour, and he just looks like a guy that's like a little rough around the edges, bearing a load on his shoulders. And Ian and I turned to each other and I'm like, fuck, like that's the guy right there. Like,
look at him, there he is. He had the beard. It was fucking amazing.
So now it's to your point. It's like, how do you go about getting him, right? So we had an entry into his agent. So we made the submission. And at this time, we were also like just trying to get the movie set up. So we're going out to different companies, and
we were fielding meetings with a ton of production companies and producers, and it was actually because it's such a batshit crazy script that we had been peddling it for about 14 years. And no one would make it. They would take the meeting with us and go, this is fucking crazy. You guys are nuts. But like, someone's going to make this one day, but it probably won't be you guys. And we're like, what do you mean?
I think half of those meetings were like, they just wanted to see the lunatics who walked through the door.
Exactly. But they would tell us that because they were like, well, look, it's director dependent. You have to do something that shows what the tone of this thing is, because whatever filmmaker you give this to, it could go either way. You're like, oh, this guy's going to do it, or this gal's going to do it, and it's going to have this flavor. So like, are you going to lean into the comedy? Are you going to lean into the action? Are you going to lean into the drama? We're going to lean into all of it.
Yeah, we're doing that.
So what we ended up doing was building our way up with films, and the first one we made was $1,500, and by the time we got to Small Town Crime, that was about $1.9-2 million. And that tone that we hit in Small Town Crime was what we were able to point to, and that was enough. That gave people enough insight into what we were trying to do or what we were going to do with that film.
Now, flashback to Mel. So we were fielding all these meetings, and we get an email from a nondescript address that doesn't ring a bell for any of us.
Yeah, and it was like, hey, I love the script. I thought it was really funny. Let's sit down for a chin wag. No sign off. And I'm like, okay, great. It must be another producer or financier that like wants to take a meeting with us and tell us we're crazy. So I'm like, okay. So I get on there and I type it out. I'm like, hey, great, love it, awesome. Can't wait to meet you. Who am I talking to? Sorry, there's no sign off and I can't tell from your email because it was a pseudonym.
Yeah.
And
it wasn't like Braveheart.
No.
Or something like that.
Yeah. Hacksaw, Braveheart, Apocalypse.
Braveheart Dude 69 or something great like that, right?
Or it's just freedom.
That would have been even better, the freedom one. He goes, oh yeah, sorry, I always forget to leave a handle. This is Mel. And I went, oh! And I was called Ash. I'm like, oh my God, he likes the script. So, I mean, we didn't even know when or if he was going to read it because you send it to the agents and you're praying to God that they think there's worth there or something that might interest their client. And then they send it to the client, unbeknownst to you. Usually they're not like, hey, I really like the script. I'm going to send it to Mel now. They're just like, okay, I'm going to send it to Mel. And if he has the time or responds to this, then, these guys will hear from him sometime down the line.
It's literally throwing a note in a bottle into an ocean.
God, it feels like it, man.
Yeah, no, it is. And you just don't know when that message is going to wash back or if it ever will.
So we're trying to get the financing going, pick a producing partner and get the talent at the same time when that was all kind of swirling.
And then we ended up meeting with them, sitting down for coffee. And we're like, okay, let's just see how this goes, It
was supposed to be like a 45-minute meeting at a cafe. And like 3.5 hours later, we're still there and we're all Jones and jazzed and he's got another meeting or something to go to. So he has to break away, but we were all like hugging and like it was still talking in the parking lot in front of his car. Like we were all pumped up about it. And it was really this moment where, I mean, look, it's a crazy script that mixes a lot of tones and genres. That's what we love to do.
But we wanted to ground the fantastic.
But there's always a grounding to it. Like we always want it to be very grounded so that you don't, because it makes everything kind of flow better in our minds. Mm-hmm. And the penultimate moment when we were like, this is the fucking guy, is when he tells us, he's talking about the scene where he's standing at the balcony. He's talking to the elves. He's breaking it to them. Hey, look, he's like, and I think when I do that moment, I should just be like, almost in tears. He's like, I feel like it's that kind of moment. Like, and we're like, yeah. And he goes, and that's what's going to be so funny about it. And we're like, yes, you get it. And like, you could, like, he immediately got like these layers we were aiming for in the script. He just read right into it. And then, was adding his own flavor to that character. And he picked this kind of Western aesthetic and this rough guy.
Like he's an old cowboy.
And man, it was so fun, collaborating with him.
One of my favorite scenes, guys, and I don't want to give too much of it away, is when you guys pull the camera way, way back and there's a standoff between two characters late in the movie. And that shot was unbelievable. I love that shot so much. That Western aesthetic you're talking about.
That's probably the moment that we were sitting there like, punching each other in the shoulder going like, can you believe this? Can you believe this is happening right now?
There's so many times that it's so surreal because, I mean, you have to understand, like, we were rejected for 14 years. Like, just kept getting punted. And then to have that moment where, like, we have the elves and Captain Jacob come to set, and we're like, this is insane. Like, waiting for them. You're like, what? Like, there'll be times where I'd be like, I can't believe we're getting to make this freaking movie.
That's awesome, guys. That's so great, guys.
Well, it's so weird because I remember interviewing Mel Gibson for Hacksaw Ridge, and then when I saw the Fatman trailer, I'm like, that's the same look he had, essentially. I don't think I realized, because essentially the mustache, it's interesting that Hacksaw Ridge was connected to kind of meeting and talking about his idea in the film. So one thing I wanted to get to specifically is the idea of being brothers as filmmakers. You have so many great brother duos, Safdie brothers, Russo brothers, Duffer brothers. Like, there's so many incredible brothers who work together over the years with filmmaking. And I'm just wondering how that dynamic is specifically. Does one of you direct more than the other? Like, you look at the Coen brothers, for example, and sometimes you'll see like Joel is just the director credit and Ethan is the writing, or the other way around. I just wonder, like, is that something that like you take into account? Does one of you direct more than the other?
I think ultimately, by the time we get to directing, our vision has synchronized throughout the writing process. I mean, honestly, Ian and I say, and this isn't a cliche, like we've become so dysfunctionally codependent over the years. Like I don't know if we could get through a movie without the other one.
It'd be pretty rough. He's like beyond like our working habits, which start in the script phase, where it's literally one of us writing, one of us pacing. and going
take
back
the
and
keyboard,
forth.
yeah.
And then I mean, look, you know how it is. Like you start to get excited about something, and then you start kind of lining up on like what that's going to look like, and you start laughing about certain moments or lines or whatever, and getting really excited. Then one of us will put it down, boom, and then we start passing it back and forth, and then pretty soon we're not even quite sure who wrote what by the end of it, or came up with what. It's like, did you come up with that line? I don't know. Did you come up with that? I think you. It's literally that ridiculous. And then it's kind of the same by the time we get to directing. Like, he's a professional storyboard artist, so we write it out, he boards it out, and then it's like, it is what it is, and it's like there is always room for an interpretation. It's more of a blueprint, but like you'll get to the set on the day, and it's like, okay, the gas tank is flipped around, or the car's on the other side, or we don't have a gas station, we have a booth, and you don't have a this, you have a that, and that's, you just kind of lean into that and figure it out. Or the actor says, hey, you know what? I'd like to do this and then walk around over there, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, well, hey, Johnny, let's talk about how we're going to cover that. Our DP,
Johnny's our DP.
yeah, that we've made like 5 films with. He's
he's like a third Nelms brother.
He's the third Nelms brother. I think the biggest thing that we get out of each other, besides the collaboration and the building of the creativity, is that I can't tell you how important it is, because there's plenty of times, I think everybody has those moments of self-doubt or a moment that you think's going to work incredibly, and you're like, hey, like, this is going to be fucking great. And he's like, that's a shit idea. And I'm like, is it? And then we start talking about it, and once in a while I'll win him over. I'm like, well, what if I did that shit idea like this? And he's like, actually, that kind of works.
Yeah, like
that works. Or the other thing that happens if we're off like that, usually we're boom, 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 boom 90% of the time. But if we're off, usually it goes to the most passionate person. So like, he's like, oh yeah, he's going to have this watch, he's going to do this, and he's going to set it down like that. I'm like, I don't know, that seems kind of, and he's like, no, it's going to fucking work. No, because this isn't about, and I'm like, I don't know. He's like, trust me, it's going to work. We have to have it in the film. I'm like, all right, shit, he's got a vision for this shit. And then lo and behold, every time that happens for one of us, like, I can remember like a specific line in one of our movies that I was like, God, I don't like that line. I wish we could. I tried to edit it out. I tried to take it out in the script. He's like, no, it's got to go in. No, it's important because of this, and this. It feeds back into this. I'm like, oh, God. And then, of course, we finish the film. We start to screen it for those. We do like a little screening process, like 5 to 10 people at a time as we're honing our edit. Mm-hmm. And I shit you not, every time there's a moment like that one of us is passionate about, 99.9% of the time, it comes back in those moments when we're screening it. And they're like, man, that line just really hit me right here. And I'm like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Like, he's right. Damn it. It's like,
and I think as far as like on the set when we're co-directing, like, if Ian and I are both hyped up, like we were watching something and we're both enjoying it, and we'll just turn to each other and go, that worked for me. Great. Yeah. He's like, that worked for you? Yeah, we're in. We're moving on. Let's go. Yeah. But you instantly get like a sounding board. It's like, good. Yep, moving on.
Yeah, you don't have to second guess yourself. You're like, there's my second guess, and he's good with it. Let's go. Or man, I'm on the fence. And then if I'm on the fence or he's on the fence, we sit there and go, blah, 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 blah. And then within 2 seconds, we have it. And we're like, let's do this. We run forward with it and start talking about it with the actors.
And one more quick thing. I'm sorry, say it again.
We have been tested. So we had what would you say, like John Hawks on Small Town Crime.
Well, we didn't even know.
He didn't tell us
like he was talking about it at a Q&A. It might have been South by Southwest or like a SAG screening or something, but he was talking about, for Small Town Crime, he was talking about how he walked up to us on set and he's like, I was nervous with 2 directors. I was like, how's this going to work? Like, never worked with 2 directors before. He's like, so I walked up to Eshom and I was like, asked him a question when he was alone. He's like, and he gave me an answer, and then I wandered off, and like, he's like, 15 minutes later, I see Ian by himself, and so I walked over to him, asked him the exact same question. He's like, they gave me the exact same answer. He's on. I was like, okay, we're gonna be fine.
That's amazing. And then one more quick thing, in the marketing, your names are fully fledged out versus just the Nelms brothers. It's your first and last name. Sometimes you see Russo brothers or Coen brothers. I just wonder, was that a personal choice? You wanted to have your full names, or do you want to be known as the Nelms brothers? I'm just interested to know, like,
either one. We're not particular about anything like that. I don't know why it's like that. Maybe it's just because at a moment we were, because there's plenty of times where the stuff says Nelms Brothers on it. We'll send a script out and it's like, hey, this script, Nelms Brothers version, or hey, this script, Nelms Brothers. Like, we do it all the time. So I don't quite know why that is like that. Ian Nelms and Eshom Nelms. I don't know why it's like it's not like
cool.
it just kind of happened,
Jake makes us put his name above all of ours.
Like Nicholson and Batman style. Like Nicholson got top billing over Batman. So if it works, if it's good enough for Nicholson, it's good enough for me. I want to talk about directing a director. Like not just a director, but a great Oscar-winning director. And even though he is an actor in this film and he's a great actor, whenever you make a directorial decision, knowing that you're directing a man who has won an Oscar for directing, does it add a certain level of pressure where you're like, shit, like, would he do this? Like, does he think this is okay? Is he cool with this camera movement? Or do you just have to separate it and go, look, we're the directors, he's the actor, like, we got to do our thing?
So we tried to approach it like that, but look, there's always the level of like, we got the butterflies in our stomach because we're coming out with somebody who's so accomplished. But I think overall, luckily we've made a few films when we were able to sort of lean on each other in those moments, as I was just talking about.
When you might have any moments of self-doubt.
Moments of self-doubt. You're like, this is good, right? We're not.
Should we call it Fatman? I don't know anymore.
Like Mel wouldn't have done this differently, right? There's no moment like that because usually we're so like, okay, blah, 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 this is how we're going to do it. And we're like, yeah, this is how we're going to do it. We kind of march out there and start heading in that direction. And I don't believe there was a moment where anybody was, I can't think of one where anybody was like, well, why don't we do it like this, guys? It was like, that was the great thing about Mel. He wasn't ever, if he did do it, he was a Jedi because he was he was incredibly like collaborative, he would like walk up and be like, what's the lens on that camera? Oh, 65, interesting. What's that one? 30, oh, 35. Okay. Yeah. He was super highly aware of everything.
Cool.
But I think, look, as a filmmaker, he sees all. Yeah. Right? He sees every hiccup, everything that's going right. But he also, I think, believed in the movie that we were trying to make. And he didn't want to interfere in any way with that. But he was just a wonderful collaborator in that regard.
Anytime he gave a suggestion, it was literally precursed with, now look, guys, you don't have to take everything I say. Which was amazing. It's like takes all the pressure off, and you're like, actually, I want to hear what you have to say. It takes all the like, this is how you're going to do it, boys. Takes all that shit out of it, and you instantly your guard goes way down. So he was such a great collaborator in that way that he'd be like, you don't have to do it this way, or this is, but what do you think of this, or what do you think of that, and a lot of this I recall more from the editing process because we finished the film, we gave it to him, we said, hey, we'd love you to take a look at the film. Of course,
cool.
Site. He watched the whole thing through, and he's like, I'm great. I'm done. I feel like you guys did a great job. I'm excited about it, and you don't have to touch a frame. We're like, fuck, are you serious? And then he was like, we were like, well, look.
Can you put that on the poster? Like Mel Gibson says, it's really good.
Well, we were like, if you have any refrigerator moments, let us hit us, right? So he calls us 2 days later, and he goes, hey, I've watched it three times.
What's a refrigerator moment?
What is that?
So a refrigerator moment's like something where you watch a movie and then later when you're having that midnight sandwich and you're opening up the fridge, you're like,
I've never heard of that before.
Makes sense.
In the shower moment, the refrigerator moment.
Oh yeah, I have a ton of those.
Yeah, did he have a refrigerator moment? Did he have one?
He called us 3 days later and he was like, hey, I've watched the movie 3 times and I see a couple things. He's like, I see a few things. And we're like, oh, well, like,
we're going to write them down or something?
Write them down. He's like, well, what if I just come over? And we're like, yeah, because we were editing the movie in Ian's basement, and so we're like, come on over, dude.
Yeah, so he came over. We sat down for like 9 or 10 hours and just went through the whole film, and it was amazing because he was like, "What do you? Okay, well, this I don't know what to do here, but let's talk about it and fuck around with it." So he's like, "I just thought maybe we could cut 2 seconds out, or what if we cut to him running, and what if we did? It was just a lot of what ifs, and we just went through the film with him and fucked around with it for 10 hours." A lot of stuff we kept that we thought was really cool. Some stuff we just couldn't work. He's like, you fucking had it better before. Let's go back. It was really fun, man. It was like a
awesome
master class in like,
it was great.
What would Mel Gibson do? Let's
wow.
It was fun, man.
And then totally like Ian said, like when he walked out the door, he's like, hey,
wash it
off.
Like,
if you look at this tomorrow and you're like, I like the way it was, he's like, no sweat.
I'm happy.
Did he ever start like a piece of advice with, well, when I was on Braveheart, ...
He did a couple times, but
we were like, yes, give us more of that, please.
We stole as much of that as we could.
Dude, he'd be sitting there on set and just regaling people with all kind of war stories from films past. And he'd be like, well, on Braveheart, like I would double print some frames, like when the stuff would go through people, and we're like, fuck yeah, we double printed some shit in Fatman. We're like, double printed some shit in Fatman.
Because of that conversation.
Which frames? Do you mind? Because I remember when I interviewed him for Hacksaw Ridge, he talked about the double frames.
Oh, that's amazing.
And then what did you use it for here? I would love to know.
Well, I don't want to say because it kind of gives away a lot in the movie, but there's a bit of a
of scuffle,
and something dramatic happens, and so we just to emphasize it a little bit more, we hang on another frame there.
When a certain
awesome.
something happens.
That's the Braveheart moment. I actually want to say.
It is. I like that. You're right.
That is
You're
a
right.
Braveheart-esque moment. I want to just talk briefly about this element of the film in that, because the title is the title and it's impactful, but it doesn't really give away what the movie is. But then when people sort of give the one sentence description, it's like, oh, well, Walton Goggins is an assassin who's going to kill Santa Claus, played by Mel Gibson. And you're like, oh, I'm in, right? That's it. But when I finally sat down to watch the movie, I was amazed at how long you guys wait. You're 30 or 40 minutes into the movie before you guys actually tip your hand. Like, some things are indicated at and some things are, hinted at, but it doesn't really push all the cards onto the table until you're pretty deep into the movie. And I wanted you guys to just talk about like having faith in your audience to stay with the characters and to really get into the problems that they're having, as opposed to like a trailer that might put out like, oh, this is exactly what the movie is. You really take your time and lay out this world. There's like 3 components that are going on and they all have to converge. And I was super impressed by the patience that you guys had.
Well, I think it's a couple of things, right? I mean, one, it's a character piece, and like I think the most important thing in a movie like this, I mean, it's why The Good and the Bad and the Ugly works so fucking well. You spend so much time with each one of those characters. Even fucking Angel Eyes, you're like, yeah, I'd follow this guy. I'd follow this guy for 2 hours. He's fucking a great character. He's amazing.
Yeah.
And so for us, like, you need that investment with the story, with the dynamic, to make everything start paying off later.
Yeah. So we wanted you to get in there and really, when we wrote the script and we started passing it out, because I know when you get to this point and you have to have a certain amount of marketing to get people to understand what you've made. So hopefully they'll be intrigued to come see it. So like you said, like, the title doesn't quite give it away. The first 20 or 30 minutes of the script doesn't quite give it away. We drop a few hints, but when you're reading the script, it's a lot like watching the movie without a trailer. You're like, oh shit, he's Santa Claus? 20 minutes, 30 minutes in, fuck. That would have been great to be able to get people to go into the movie not knowing that.
Not knowing.
Because it's how the trailer is structured. But the only thing we could do, because every distributor is like, no, you can't hold that back. If people walk it, like, you're going to have a lot of people going to see this movie because of the premise.
Yes,
you
sure.
Don't get them in there on the premise, they're not going to go see the movie. So it's like Mel or any actor just being a blue-collar warehouse owner having business troubles is a very different movie.
Right. Can't pay his bills.
So that's the one thing when we were writing the script, we were like, we got to find a way to get people into Chris as Chris and not as Santa. And that's what we're doing for the first 20, 30 minutes of the movie. We're building this guy that you go, oh, this is my hero. He's got troubles like I do. It's fucking hard times. His wife's trying to fucking help him out of this funk. How are they going to fix this? Holy shit, he's fucking Santa. That's his fucking problem.
Right.
And the same thing goes for us with our with Walton and Chance. Yeah. Right? Like, we want you to be equally invested in those characters and not just have them be some generic bad
I think like with Billy, I mean, you could have easily just had him like all of a sudden he's evil Richie Rich immediately, but we wanted to like get you to like him at first. Oh, grandma.
Or maybe you just don't quite know.
Yeah, oh, grandma, this and that, and I love you, grandma. And then he comes downstairs and he's kind of shitty to the help, and you're like, was he shitty to the help? Shitty to that maid? What an asshole. Was he? And then in the next scene, you see him, oh, okay, well, he's a precocious little man, and look, he's made this amazing project. Maybe he is a good kid. Then he loses, and he becomes like gobsmacked that he's just fucking lost.
Now he's down
he's down the rabbit hole.
And then for us, we wanted to give Skinny Man's character like some of the world to build out.
Yeah.
So in that opening scene when he's got the bat and you see the badges and all this stuff, it's like it's fleshing out the world. So you're like, oh, okay, like, shit, Santa Claus is fucking real in this world.
People, for the most part, know it. And it's probably a lot like this world. Not that he's real, but there are people like kids that go, oh, Santa's real. And then at a certain point you realize, oh, shit, he's not real. It's my parents. Or but there are people that believe in Santa, or there are people that believe in the Christmas spirit. Like, that's a real thing. And then we sort of cap it off by having the placards. But that it's like these are coveted items,
So I'll end it on this only because I'm just interested. I was thinking of you as brothers and growing up and having Christmas. I'm just wondering what your Christmases were like as brothers. Because like my brother and I, we had our traditions. I was just interested to know, like, because you make a movie like this. I just wonder what your Christmases were like as kids. Like, did you open up gifts first? Who had the first gift and second gift and things like that?
Oh, interesting. Well, look, I mean, our mother and father are hardcore. They go hard on Christmas.
That was the holiday.
That was the holiday.
Like, we would walk into a grocery store or like a Target or something, and we'd be like, "Oh, hey, can I get no? Oh, can I get no?" And then like when you get to Christmas, all that shit's there, and you've got 50 things to open up. And then you go back to school, and you're like, "Oh, man, all this shit I got," and your friends are like, "I got 5 things," and you're like, "Fuck!" But I guess it evened out. You know what I mean? Like because our friends would go out to the mall and they come back with all this shit, and we're like, "God, how'd they get all that?"
Like I'm like, "Mom, can I get a pair of shorts for school?" She's like, "No, gotta wait for Christmas." Like that's how I like months away.
But they went hard on Christmas. They saved it up, and all that shit was under the tree. You got a whole year there under the tree.
Do they find it odd then that you made a movie where Santa gets hunted by an assassin?
I think our mom is still shaking her head. You know, she's not quite sure what went wrong with all the effort that she put into Christmas.
You tried to make it special and happy for us.
Well, we can't thank you guys enough for joining the show, honestly. And so let people know, how are they going to be able to see the film in the weeks coming up?
Yes. Yeah. So theaters, it comes out in theaters November 13th. I think it's still kind of expanding, which is amazing because every day they seem to be sending us a list of 5 or 6 new theaters, which is amazing. And I think it's just in the parlance of our times, as these theaters are realizing they're going to be open during that time, they're kind of saying, yes, okay, hey, we can put you guys up. But I mean, Saban's doing the best they can to get us in as many theaters as they can on the 13th. And then
24th.
On the 24th, we come out on
the on-demand platforms.
Yeah, VOD.
Oh, terrific.
Yeah.
Good.
That's great. That's a perfect window, we think. We were talking about that the other day about how the windows are. I'm glad you're getting theatrical because I feel like this is a great theatrical film. So we really appreciate you guys being on our ReelBlend podcast. This has been an absolute honor, and we're so excited for people to see this film. And obviously, thank you for sharing all your stories and with Mel Gibson. That story of him coming to your house and editing is insane. Like that is like one of the coolest things I've ever heard. So
it's been a pretty surreal experience.
Yeah.
Not even a lot.
That's awesome. I hope it's just.
It has been amazing.
Yeah, I hope it's just starting for you guys. I hope it's.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
And please don't forget about us as it continues on and you guys keep making movies. Please keep coming back to the
Hey, don't forget about us. Keep coming back to us every movie we make.
Yeah.
Keep rocking that.
you have an invitation anytime you want to be on our show. Anytime.
Dude, amazing. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Those guys were awesome. We want to thank them so much for coming on. Thanks to the Nelms brothers for coming on to the ReelBlend podcast, and we want to recommend Fatman. Well, Kevin and I are recommending Fatman. Jake, did you caught up with it? Did you not?
No,
you didn't get a chance to see
watching it.
No. It's really fun. You guys should definitely give it a shot. Kev, what did you think of it?
Oh, well, I really enjoyed Fatman, but I also want someone who listens to ReelBlend to count the number of F-bombs said by the director, the Nelms brothers, in that interview. I would like to know. Remember how many one of them kept dropping.
You really think that that's the record? You think that? I don't think so. I think we've had far more.
I
don't
think
know.
If anything, by me.
I think that interview might hold the record of most F-bombs on
I'm
our
trying to
show.
think of who else. I feel like Apatow dropped some.
Yeah.
But this guy was
did.
every sentence.
Joaquin, yeah.
But most of the people that we get are really press polished. You know, like they know they're doing interviews for it. These guys were just Fatman, diving right in. So
I'll tell you right now, one of the things that I found fascinating about this film was how grounded it was. It somehow kept a realism that was so interesting to me. Because like you have this movie that borderlines such an absurdity. I mean, you're dealing with a kid who hires a hitman to kill Santa Claus, and like Sean was saying in the interview, they brilliantly don't dive really much into that. They until 20-30 minutes in the film because they're grounding it so much. Like there's a scene, and I think Sean, you mentioned this, and I looked out for it specifically, where I won't go into too many specific details, but the idea of Superman, of Santa Claus, is this concept of he's a government employee, and he's essentially has workers who are elves, and like there's this really devastating sequence where he has to like tell his workers that we're going to be manipulating the way we do things because we need money, essentially. And it's like, it works for some weird reason. The elves have the ears are pointing up. It's an absurd concept. It's R-rated. It's extremely violent. But at the same time, they ground it. And I think Gibson's performance is so great because it's almost like that tone where you don't take it too seriously, but you take it seriously enough where you can buy into it. It's almost like Face Off, right? As ridiculous as Face Off is, you buy into it and it's grounded in a weird way. You actually buy into it and you believe what you're watching. And I think those are some of the best films. Also, Mondo Boys, their composers, incredible. Like that score.
Oh, their score was great.
The score is unbelievable. Like the score is like so good. I think Goggins might. Goggins' performance is just, it's incredible. And that little kid is great too. I mean, there's some great performances, and I kept thinking about the cookies, Sean, because you kept mentioning that during the movie.
So who did you get? You got Mel paired with who? With the kid?
Mel Gibson was paired with Marianne Jean-Baptiste.
Who plays Mrs. Claus.
Right, and Chance Hurtsfield, who plays the young kid who... hires Goggins to kill Mel Gibson's character, Santa Claus.
That's a weird pairing. That's a weird pairing to put all three of them together.
If you've seen the movie, it's a very strange pairing. It would have made more sense with Gibson and Jean-Baptiste, and then the kid with somebody else. Maybe the kid with Goggins. Goggins didn't do it. And I guess I can just go ahead and say this. In the interview, and I think Gabe will keep it in there. There's a cool point where they were referring to double printing of frames. And so when I interviewed them yesterday, I was just like, listen, I'll keep this as a spoiler, and I can hold this unless you want me to tell you now. They told me where the double frame is. And if you're looking for it, it's kind of a cool thing. So back in the day, Gibson used to do this double printing of frames in films. It was just a way to essentially elongate a shot, and it kind of, in my opinion, it's an immersive tool for the audience, and it kind of keeps the image up slightly longer and makes it more effective. All I will say is that they did confirm that the double frame is towards the end in the third act, and it deals with a sharp object going into somebody's body.
Okay,
that's all I will
exactly
say.
What you're talking about. Then.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I know exactly what you're talking about. All right, let's get to talking points. I find this unusual because one of the last in-person interviews we got to do as the ReelBlend team was John Krasinski for A Quiet Place.
The last.
Yes, the last one that we did. We were in New York City before the industry shut itself down. And it was for Quiet Place Part 2. We have not been able to run that yet. That movie has now been pushed back till 2021. And it turns out that before that film even comes to theaters, it's going to be getting a spinoff. Do we
still have that? Who has that interview? Do you?
Gabe,
I'd love to hear it. Like, honestly, I'd love to hear it.
Krasinski keeps texting me. He goes, "When are you guys airing this?" I'm like, "No, I'm kidding." No,
weirdly enough, Emily Blunt keeps texting me.
In all honesty, John Krasinski's not texting me, but I was wondering that the other day. Like, do we still have that file? Is the link still working for it? Did we download the file?
I downloaded everything. Everything was safe.
And shout out to Junket. I want to give a shout out to Junket Productions. I know this is not going to air for a while, but Junket Productions is the company who generally puts together the press junkets that we do. They set the cameras up. They build our tapes. They were so nice to actually professionally record the interview for us because Gabe wasn't there this time. Because I remember Gabe coming up for Tarantino, which was amazing. But shout out to them. They've been working really hard during the pandemic with all the junkets and the Zoom stuff. So
I gotta ask, do you guys remember the ending of Quiet Place Part 2?
Yes.
I cannot remember it for the life of me. I feel like enough time has passed and I've seen enough things that I can hardly remember what happened.
In fact, whenever
I can't actually.
Whenever the talk of A Quiet Place 3 came out, my first thought was, okay, it's got to pick up at that place.
Okay. Then tell me afterwards because I honestly don't remember.
I'll tell you.
We're super excited for Jeff Nichols taking over A Quiet Place spinoff. Now, we don't know any of the details, right? We don't know like what type of...
Well, it's a story from Krasinski, right? It's Krasinski's story.
Okay.
Do you think that... Not that I'm not excited... Obviously, we're all excited about Nichols coming in because he's an incredible storyteller. But I can't imagine that Emily's going to keep making these. If anything, I'd say she'll do one more and then that'll be it.
I would assume...
So is there any part of you that's surprised that Krasinski wouldn't want to come back just to, like, if it just, I'm not saying, I mean, knowing any studio, they'll keep making them and keep making them and keep making them. But if this family is just going to be the core, like, trilogy, and then they make spin-offs.
Right.
Aren't you a little surprised that Krasinski wouldn't come back just to do the last one and close it out?
But wait, he might though still, right? Like this is not Quiet Place Part 3. There could theoretically still be a Quiet Place Part 3 that focuses on this family.
Wait, I thought this was the Quiet Place Part 3.
No, I think this is a spin-off.
Spin-off.
Oh, it's a spin-off.
That's the way, the Hollywood Reporter was reporting it.
Yes.
Jake, I'm
Jeff
with
Nichols
you.
is coming in to
I
tell
read
a
it.
story
I thought it was
in
part
that
3.
world.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So you're
It's almost
saying
like when they were showing the campfires in the first one,
See,
and you saw other
okay.
people communicating, and you
Yeah,
thought,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
how are they surviving
Yeah.
in this weird environment?
which
Or it could be-
they also touch on in Part 2.
they do, yes. Shh, spoilers. I know, that's fine. It's
I saw it like 1,000 years ago. I gotta talk about it with somebody.
wait, so
You know,
so-
I was talking. This is the most like name drop thing. But you know, Kevin Smith was Kevin's best friend. Kevin Smith was in Chicago last week, and somehow we were talking. He was asking me about how junkets are going, and I said, well, yeah, you know, I said we're doing them via Zoom, and you know, this is kind of how we're doing them. And he was like, oh, what's the last one that you did before kind of the world? And I was like, actually, it was A Quiet Place Part 2. He goes, you've seen it? And I was like, yeah. He goes, tell me everything. I was like, no, but it was like, it's interesting. Like, I forget that, like, we've seen a movie that, you know, 0.0001% of the movie going public has seen.
And I sat right next to ReelBlend #1 fan, beside my mom, Chase, our buddy Chase. So I keep wanting to call him Chase Crawford, which is his real
Well, no, you call Chase Crawford Chase Cusack, and then you call
know.
Chase Cusack Chase Crawford.
Sorry, Chase
So Nichols,
Cusack.
we assume, has to bring Michael Shannon back for this, right? Like that's
Oh,
where
yeah. But the least quiet actor in the world. when he really gets going.
He could be subdued if he wants.
Sure.
to.
He can be brooding and menacing in a quiet way.
You know? Oh God, he would be great.
You know what's-
We were talking about how Take Shelter and also
Take Shelter.
Midnight
If
Special.
you've never,
Midnight Special.
so
feel
you
like
guys,
they-
it sounds like you. When we were talking earlier, it sounds like you guys are more mid. I'm more of a Take Shelter guy. You guys a Midnight Shelter.
Midnight Special.
Midnight Shelter.
I like them both.
Midnight Special. Sorry.
I think
Midnight
Midnight
Special-
Special. Go ahead. No, I was gonna say I think Midnight Special is maybe they're both great examples of why he's perfect for a Quiet Place movie. But I think Midnight Special
100%.
really captures the tone of him protecting his family and being on the run from something.
Did he do?
Yeah.
Did he do
So-
Mud also?
Mud? Yeah.
He did Mud too.
He hasn't made a bad
damn.
movie.
Damn.
Not
Wait,
a single
Mud's
one.
terrific.
Shotgun? Is it Shotgun Stories? Was his first movie?
I'm not sure.
Fantastic.
This sounds like a man that needs to be on ReelBlend.
Well, that's part of the reason I'm so
Yes.
excited about this is he's the kind of filmmaker who he makes his movies in his hometown in Texas with the crew that he's had forever and Michael Shannon. And he doesn't really do, I think Midnight Special might be his biggest budget that he shopped around, but he really keeps things very indie. And I love the thought of him doing a Quiet Place movie, it making a ton of money with his name on it and him getting a huge budget to do a Nichols original was what I'm hoping the best case scenario is.
Midnight Special is the movie that put Nichols on the map for me personally.
It's so good.
It's just an incredible film. I mean, if anybody out there hasn't seen it, it's like one of my favorite. It's like one of the best sci-fi movies I've seen in. I can't remember the last time I saw something like that. I mean, Interstellar probably, but it's great.
I'm torn between I want John Krasinski to come back and finish a trilogy, but I'm also intrigued to see what else he can do. Right? Like I kind of want him to take on another project, explore something else, because I really do feel seeing those two films that he's got a lot of potential. And
Well,
I
that's
wanna
why
see
I
him-
always liked what Nolan did with the Batman trilogy, which is do a movie in between.
Right.
Like he did Batman Begins and then did The Prestige, came back for The Dark Knight, did Inception, and then came back for The Dark Knight Rises.
Isn't that what Coppola did with Godfather? Right? Did he do the first two and then he do Apocalypse Now in between? Am I wrong on that?
Well, there was like a 20-year gap between.
Right, but there was.
Oh, do you think Paramount would give us Coppola for the remastering of Part 3?
No.
I know exactly what I was thinking about. I was thinking
No.
I think he made The Conversation and Godfather
Well,
2.
he did Conversation and God. I thought he did Conversation and Godfather like
They
the
were
same
both
year.
1974
They were
films.
both
Damn.
nominated for Best Picture
Damn.
too. He had
That's
ridiculous.
That's like a Spielberg Schindler's List Jurassic Park kind of thing.
dude. He had The Conversation and was it Godfather 1 or 2?
I thought it was one.
Either one. They were nominated for Best Picture at the same time.
Yeah, that's insane.
That's crazy.
So they split the vote. Come on, that's not fair. Something else must have rose up. No, because Godfather won it, didn't
Godfather won. They didn't
it? Yeah,
split the vote.
Godfather won it. Well, anywho, Netflix is going to be launching its first linear programming starting in France. So this is Netflix exploring whether it could be a channel, programming its own content putting in films and television shows of which it has ownership of. I'm going to assume it's largely just Netflix stuff. I don't necessarily see why this is a thing, because the beauty of Netflix is that it's at your fingertips programming, and that you can start and stop whatever you want. And why would you want to adhere to? It's almost like they're going backwards towards, they're going to reestablish the model that they helped to destroy, which is appointment television. Because we now live in a generation, I can speak for my own kids, who never know what time anything is ever on and don't care. Like, they just watch what they want to watch because it's available at the moment. It does, to me at least, signify how powerful Netflix is becoming, though. Like, if they're able to establish a television channel that is filled with their original programming, it shows what a back catalog of shows and films that they have backed to this point. But I don't really see the upside. Do either of you guys see the point of this?
To me, it reminds me of, at least before the days where you would have a touch screen and you could choose between things. Remember when you would be on a plane and it would just show you a random episode of a random show, and you would kind of be like, well, I guess I'll watch this because there's nothing, I don't know. It's just sort of like, like, who is going to turn on the Netflix channel and watch episode 3 of season 4 of Stranger Things? Like, that's exactly the random ass thing I wanted to be watching. Like, if anything, it's just going to remind me of like something else I'd rather be. I just don't see, like, I don't know who the audience for this is, especially when people have the option to watch something different. Like, right. I don't know who the audience for this is.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure.
Kevin?
I'm just as baffled by this as well, because like you said, John, it kind of goes against the whole idea. Yeah, I don't.
The only thing I can think of is if they're establishing a footprint so that they can eventually debut exclusive things there. Like, would that not be the only thing? If you could say, like, we could give you a primetime exclusive window to show X, come to our channel. Like, that's the only real thing that's left for these networks to hold on to, is when they have something live and exclusive, right?
Do they start, is it like a paid channel like HBO, or do they start putting commercials in it?
I don't know. I don't think it's okay. So wait, they said that it's available. It's not available through their set top, but it's available through their URL. Isn't that how it's going to work?
So it's important to note this is a test. This is not an officially launched. Sure. You can only it's only available in their French market, and it's only available on their web browser. So it's it is a test through and through. And I think that what they're looking for, a lot of what you guys are talking about, is how interested are people. But I do think that there's merit to it in that, one, not everyone has cut the cord. And that audience may not be cutting the cord because they're not interested in that kind of model. They may be more likely to cut the cord if they see, like, oh, I can just turn something on and it's provided for me. I think that audience might exist. But also there's the whole sort of like analysis or choice paralysis sort of thing that people talk about, where you sit down for the night and you end up spending 2 hours scrolling through everything that's on Netflix and not watching anything. That whole kind of joke that there may be. I think the way that they're pitching it is, if you're just looking to throw something on and have it on, or maybe like a way to curate something. Like, imagine if Tarantino comes in and you get the Tarantino week, and it's all Tarantino programs out a week on Netflix, that you turn it on and it's something like, there's a lot of different ways that I think they could mess with it. So I agree that it's ironic, given that they sort of have invented and perfected in a lot of ways the, like, choose whatever you want whenever you want. But I'm kind of excited about it. I think they could do some cool stuff.
I don't remember if it was part of the actual 2.5 hour interview or if it was talking to Quentin after the show had wrapped. But do you guys remember how he talked about he met with Netflix because he wanted to go back through their programming, and like the first thing he searched on when he got on it was Burt Reynolds.
and they're both Longest Yard.
Yeah. It's 2 awful Burt Reynolds films, which is just such a Quentin way to do things. So, all right. So I guess we'll continue to track and see how the test does over in France, and see if Netflix finds new ways to infiltrate our homes and deliver more programming. If Netflix is going to do anything, I think they should start going the route of their shows like Disney is with Mandalorian.
Yes, I like the weekly release.
Yeah, to me, it keeps the show more relevant. I don't like the idea of consuming it all in one weekend. I think that there's something beautiful about, Friday, new Mandalorian episode is out. Yeah. And like, I mean, I think that, to me, from a business model perspective, wouldn't you want 8 or 9 weeks of like people discussing your content versus
who's talking about Bly Manor now?
Yeah,
and
no one.
I'd go even further in saying not only do I enjoy the Disney Plus model / Amazon Prime model, but I still like the HBO model best, where it's Sunday at 8:00.
Yes,
that's when it's available.
Yeah.
Not because Mandalorian coming out on Friday.
Yeah,
there's a group of people that have
yeah.
seen it Friday morning, and I spend the whole day trying to avoid it.
Like I have to like almost be weary of being on my phone Friday morning because we wake up when we all have to work. Like I'm so nervous that I'm going to get on Twitter and see someone post a screenshot of dead baby Yoda or something. Like I just don't want something. I'm so nervous every Friday morning.
You had to go to
Yoda.
Dead Baby.
Jeez.
I'm trying to think of like what's the most drastic thing that could happen on that show that people would freak out about.
2020's been already pretty bad. That would be.
Could you imagine? Wow.
Oh my god.
I want to go back to
His
Netflix
little
for a second.
hand
What if instead of a channel, if Netflix invested in a series of theaters, where the only thing playing in their theaters was their feature-length programming?
I don't want to go back to the world. Yeah, they have. What they buy? That one of them in.
Well, that was the whole issue with the golden age of Hollywood and the Paramount Accords, right? Was that the MGMs of the world owned theaters and they were only showing their own stuff. So they could, I guess, but
I don't want to have to like go to different theaters because different studios.
Exactly.
Like I don't want to have to go to this theater to see this movie and to this theater to see this movie. Can you guys
why
hear
not?
that?
Why not though? Because
that's a pain in the ass.
Because back in the 40s and 50s, that was harder to do, but now it's not.
Well, no. I mean, think about how many places only have a single theater. Yeah. And imagine if that single theater gets bought by Disney, and then it only shows Disney properties, which are a lot of things and most things. But
the El Capitan.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't love
the most uncomfortable seats in the world.
Oh, it's the worst. I know.
I do like that experience, though. I do like.
I'm over it. I got to be honest with you. The appeal of the El Capitan is over for me.
You snob.
I don't know. There's something
so exciting to be at it.
I wouldn't prefer to go to the El Capitan, but I do like the piano. But one thing I will say, going just real quick back to the Netflix model. I have a. Would you guys think Netflix will make this change anytime soon? Especially when they see how The Boys was talked about for 8 or 9 weeks. How Mandalorian.
I think they're talking about it.
But I mean, if you're Netflix, and they should, you know what they should do? They should test it with Stranger Things, and I guarantee you that would have legs beyond belief. You drop episode 1 the day it comes out at a certain time, whatever it is, and then you have people talking about that show for 9 weeks straight, 9-10 weeks straight.
Also, too, if there's a gap in production, like if there was a gap in production because of COVID, and sometime in 2021, they're going to kind of have, and which granted, they've got so much stuff in the can, they're never really going to have a hole. But if they have like a lull where like they don't have as much stuff coming out because things have been delayed because of COVID, that's the perfect opportunity for them to start stretching things out and making things last longer. The Crown could take 10 weeks, could you imagine if like last week were the series finale of Bly Manor? Like we all would, if they dropped the finale on Halloween night, like we all would stay home and watch Bly Manor. We'd all stay home and watch the finale.
So they must have some kind of data that tells them that's why that they're favoring the total season dump versus.
I think it's because they had so much, but if they don't have as much
by now, it might just be a habit by now.
I think it became a bad habit, personally. I think that the fact that we would consume 9 hours of a show, there was no. I don't know. It's weird to say. Like, we consume films, obviously, in their entirety from 2.5 hours, 3 hours, whatever they're going to be. There's just something. Here's the problem with the dumping of all the shows at once. It's like eating a gigantic meal and just eating it all at once, and it tastes really good as you're eating it, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's no more French fries, or there's no more.
Yeah.
Like, it's a strange way to give yourself everything you want right away, because that's kind of how we are designed as a society. Get the newest thing, the biggest thing, get everything right away. And I think one, it actually hurts from a storytelling perspective to consume that much content right away. And two, there's something beautiful about an episode ending and then looking over at who you're ever watching it with or calling your friends and just kind of like dissecting stuff. And I think
that's what we used to do with Lost, and I hate to keep bringing up Lost, but okay. Like that's always to me the X factor that those of us that watched it live had, because and Kevin, if you could like force yourself to do this, like we would watch an episode and then we'd all hop on the phone and call each other and say, what do you think that means? And then we'd get online and like look up theories and like, oh, that book that character was reading, like that, it means X, Y, and Z. Like that was just as much of the experience as the show itself. And the most I've been excited watching a TV show this year was the finale of Raised by Wolves, because like I've been waiting for it for 10 weeks. Like I was so excited going into it.
Yeah. Well, and also it kills water cooler conversation because you never know where anyone else is in the show.
Yeah.
100%.
It also it lessens human interaction. We interact with each other less when we do this because you sit in front of a TV for 8 hours and you don't even dissect it. So if Netflix, if you're listening, try it with Stranger Things. See what happens, because I feel like if you already don't have Netflix and people are buzzing about a show 3-4 weeks into it, there's no way you're not going to catch that vibe and kind of get interested from that. I mean, I think to me, from a business perspective, why not? Now, is Netflix capable of doing that?
Sure, of course. Okay. Why not?
They can do whatever they want.
Yeah,
they're Netflix.
Yeah.
They're the home of Hillbilly Elegy.
Then they have. Oh, so let's get to this week in movies. And we're going to get to a bunch of films that we have seen, but I'm going to run through really quickly the ones that are opening in limited release that we have not had an opportunity to see yet. And the first one, I have to apologize to everybody. It's Ammonite, the Kate Winslet, Saoirse Ronan romance movie that I have had multiple opportunities to watch. It was at the 919 Film Festival. They gave me a link before I even went to it. It sat in my inbox. It's one of those messages that I just kept unread because I kept saying, like, tonight I'm going to watch Ammonite. I swear to God, I'm going to watch Ammonite. Then I was at the festival. There was a daytime screening of it. I was like, I got to get over to Ammonite. And then PJ was like, you want to go get wings? And I was like, yeah, let's go get wings. And then I have a screening link sitting in my inbox now. And one rep was even like, hey, do you want a screening on Ammonite? And I was like, yes, please send it over to me. And then that sat in my inbox unread. And then a second email came from Neon, and they were like, "Hey, here's another screener of Ammonite." And I can't make myself watch it.
The spirit of Kate Winslet was over your shoulder while you were watching Fatman, just judging you.
But it just feels like it's probably good, right? But it sounds like a movie that was made solely to compete for the Oscars. Like, she is a 1940s archaeologist who like goes to the beach and
I'm sorry, what the greatest movie of all time starts out that way.
Yes, true.
Yeah, you're right. It's Indiana Jones.
Yeah,
Ammonite is Indiana Jones.
You're like, sold.
But she falls in love with or she agrees to watch.
It's Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
Is that what it is?
It's essentially Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
But with
Gabe, you should be excited about this. You love that movie.
I am because the cast is great, but.
Right.
I don't know enough to see if it literally was greenlit as like a Americanized version of that.
Green.
But I mean, it's about an artist who she's like in secret with this person. There's the whole like secrecy thing is still there, and they end up falling.
But just the smattering reviews that I read was like, this is a movie that dares you like to be as subdued and quiet and introspective as you physically can. So
Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
That's another. Yes, exactly. So anyway, Ammonite is making its way to theaters and my inbox in limited release this week. The Climb is another film that's been around for a really long time. That was at Toronto last year.
This is based on the Miley Cyrus song, right?
You saw? No,
I saw it. I saw it and interviewed the stars back in March. They came into my studio.
Is it a bike riding movie or
it's based on a short film, and it's basically two guys on like a bike ride, and they're hustling up the mountain, and they're best friends, and while they're going up the mountain, one of them says, "By the way, I got to tell you, like, I slept with your fiance."
Oh.
And then the other guy's like, "I'm sorry, what?" And then the short film kind of just focuses on that. The film itself sort of expands on that and goes from that idea. I actually really enjoyed it. But now I guess it's coming out, and I've been getting all these emails. I keep reading the emails like, I feel like I've seen this movie. And I'm like, yeah, because I interviewed the guys in my studio when it was that close to coming out before COVID, and then obviously got delayed.
Such a weird year.
Weird year.
This is a really weird year. Well, that's coming in limited release. I was very quickly trying to get to lyrics for The Climb to make a joke, but my phone's not working.
Great song, by the way. That's a great song. So is Party in the USA. Don't sleep on Miley Cyrus.
Jake, do you recommend The Climb? I didn't hear. Did you recommend it?
No, I do recommend The Climb. Yeah, I do. I enjoyed it. It's a kind of a, I don't know. I don't want to say like dark comedy because that implies to me, I think of like Fatman when I think of dark comedy, but just sort of like the idea of like laughing at other people's misfortune, like a little Schadenfreude, I guess.
There was another movie that was at Toronto, and I want to say it's just called like The Friend. It has who's the guy from Jason Segel from Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Jason Segel.
Lauren
2019. It's called The Friend. It has Dakota Johnson, Jason Segel, and Casey Affleck. And it's another one of these films that plays a film festival. Kevin, did Lauren like it? Because I heard really good things.
I don't remember her thoughts on it because she loves Dakota Johnson, so I just remember her talking about it, and
then it just disappears. Like what happened to that movie? Is it ever going to come out? Is it going to go to streaming? Like one day I'll turn on Hulu and it'll be like one of the recommended films, and I'll be like, oh yeah, that movie.
The Friend.
The limited release of Dreamland. I'm not even sure what Dreamland is. Anyone? Gabe? Nothing? 1 second, he's looking it up. And another one.
And I think it has Margot Robbie in it. I think it
is. Dreamland does? The other one's called Come Away. I'm not sure what Come Away is either.
A teenager's adventures as a bounty hunter takes an unexpected twist. Margot Robbie. Garrett Hedlund.
Really?
Yeah.
Again, sound like those fake posters that are hanging up on a wall in the back of another movie. But we did see Hillbilly Elegy, or at least Jake and I have. And we can talk about Hillbilly Elegy because the embargo release is up. Kev, we'll keep it spoiler free for you. My comment on this one, and I texted Jake in the middle of it because I knew that he was about to start watching it too, is that it has a very thick layer of Ron Howard on it. Which if you love Ron Howard, then dive right in. But I think that he does a sort of very earnest but melodramatic approach to human problems, and they feel very glossy. Like you could have done this story and made it pretty edgy, and it could have been really poignant and contemporary, and it would have spoke to a lot of problems that people are having. It's essentially a pull yourselves up by the bootstraps story of this guy JD who wrote this memoir that the movie is based on. I did not read the book. Jake, you said read the book, right? Yeah. He ends up going to Yale, but he comes from really poor area of Kentucky and has to deal with the fact that his mom is a heroin addict, and even when he's older and is at school, has to come back and take care of her because she's falls back into her drug use, and his older sister who lives back at home can't handle dealing with the mom anymore. And the mom is played by Amy Adams. The grandmother's played by Glenn Close, and it's all these family problems and how they keep pulling him back in. The material is absolutely there to make for a really compelling film, but it's just one of those movies where the first 10 minutes, and I was just like, oh man, this is going to be Ron Howard's version of the Hillbilly Elegy, and I felt really bad. I ended up giving it 3 stars out of 5 because I really thought that Amy Adams and Glenn Close were that good. I thought that they were really good in the film. I think they made the most of the material that was given to them. But if you were listening to a previous episode, I made a reference to the fact that they had a relative newcomer actor who's playing JD, and both as a kid and as the college age or law school aged version, and he's fine, but he can't hold his own alongside Amy Adams and Glenn Close. And I thought he really struggled in scenes where he's supposed to be super convincing. And so the whole thing, I thought it was okay, and I thought the performances in it were really strong, but the movie as a whole just had issues.
How was Zimmer's score? I was reading that Hans Zimmer and David Fleming did the score for it. Was it memorable at all?
I couldn't even tell you. I remember seeing his name pop up and thinking, "Ooh, Zimmer did the score," and then not thinking about the score again.
Didn't
as
stand
the movie
out.
Progressed.
Okay. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the movie needed teeth. It had no teeth whatsoever. It's a story that, and granted, I don't necessarily buy into the Ron Howard was the wrong director because he grew up in the Hollywood system and doesn't understand this world, because that that makes no sense. Like, George Lucas has never been to space. It doesn't mean that he couldn't make Star Wars. Like,
Ron Howard's from rural Oklahoma, and all of his people are from there. Like, I would even argue he knows that side more than anything else.
Sure, but it's just that's not his filmmaking style.
No.
And you called it in that you said the director of Florida Project would have been a great choice for this, and that was a fantastic call.
Who's that? Sean,
it just
what's his name? Sean, the guy who directed the Florida Project.
I couldn't think of the name, but you're absolutely right. In fact, that feel of that movie is more so, but I disagree in that I don't necessarily even really think the content was there, man. For me, it just kind of felt like a bunch of different vignettes kind of stitched together. There was no really through line to the movie. It was just kind of like a bunch of scattered stories of things that happened. And the book itself, and they took so much of, the book is a really interesting timestamp of, because it came out, if I remember right, after the 2016 election.
Okay.
And the book really is a dive in and sort of a look at these sort of social and economic issues that, from the author's standpoint, JD's standpoint, would make sort of a poor community attracted to a president like Donald Trump. And so it's less, granted, the biographical aspects of the story are there, but a huge chunk of that is sort of understanding this culture and this world. And I felt like all of that was ripped out like that. You never really said there's one scene where they go to a funeral and people are marching by, or they're all standing, and JD asks Glenn Close, well, why do they do that? And she says, because we're hill people. Okay, but what does that mean? I feel like we're just as an audience supposed to go okay. I didn't really feel like they dove in. I wanted to know more about that culture. I wanted to know more about that society. I wanted to know more about what it meant to be a hill person. Instead, I felt like everything was surface level, surface level drug addiction, surface level quote unquote poor people. I grew up in a poor southern town. I know what that world is like, and I felt like to me. It was almost like if I were to bring a friend to my hometown and then ask my friend, explain to me what you saw. Explain to me what that world was like. And having them explain it back to me without having an understanding of what it was like. I feel like no one there really understood anything about what that world and what that story was supposed to actually be about.
I'm also going to single out a scene that Kevin will appreciate, and it'll also reflect how poorly I think that the screenplay handles this. Glenn Close's character, the grandmother, loves Terminator 2. And
That's
she
awesome.
watches it and quotes it numerous times to the grandson. And at one point, the grandson says, how many times have you seen this, Grandma? And she's like, a couple 100. And he's like, what? How come? And she's like, because I like it. And I was like, okay, that's cool. That gives me a little bit of flavor to who she is. And then she sits down on the couch next to him and she goes, grandson, I've learned over the years that you're either a good Terminator or a bad Terminator.
Okay, but she says, or you're in between. I was like, okay, sure, I guess. That means in the grand, you're a person. You're either a good person, a bad person, or you're somewhere in between.
And the grandson's like, so which one are you, Grandma? And she goes, well, I like to think I'm a good Terminator. But for a long time, I was a bad Terminator. I was like, stop with the Terminator analogy.
The thing that bothered me most about that scene, and this is going to drive Kevin crazy, when it shows them initially watching the movie, it's the helicopter scene where the T-1000 breaks the window and then smashes through. Yeah. And then the next moment, the conversation is going through. The next moment is the end scene where Schwarzenegger says, it flash forwards 45 minutes. I'm like, oh, that's gonna. My first thought was, that's gonna annoy Kevin. Yeah. That's gonna really piss off Kevin.
That's some continuity mistake right there. I still think that dive into the helicopter is still one of the coolest CGI shots in the history of movies. It looks so. Remember the reflections of the guy's face in the helicopter.
Get out.
Get
All
out.
Right. So we're gonna keep our spoiler-filled and in-depth conversation about this next film limited because it's not coming to theaters till later, and we want to make sure that we have plenty of content to talk about on the show. But we've all now at this point caught up with David Fincher's film Mank, which is the behind-the-scenes squabbling of how Citizen Kane got made, starring David Fincher as Herman Mankiewicz. and various other folk playing high level studio representatives who are very invested in the gubernatorial race for California, and a lot of the politics that go into both the studio system and how it affects the labor market. It's a deeper dive into that side of the industry than I expected. I'll go first, and I'll say that I really like this movie a lot, but I feel that casual audiences are not going to care. I just don't think they're going to care. And again, that's a weird thing to say about a movie because I don't know who Fincher made it for. Like, Fincher might not care if casual audiences dial into what he wanted to make. And I know that this was a screenplay that his father worked on. And I think that it's really important to him. And I think it's a beautiful recreation of Hollywood. But I think it's pretty niche. I'm going to leave it at that. And we'll get into a deeper dive from my aspect when we get closer to it. But where did you guys fall on it? Kev, you really liked it a lot.
Oh yeah, I loved it. Okay. I think it was one of the best movies of the year. I know it's not really a high bar because it's been kind of a lackluster year. I think what's brilliant about what Fincher did is he literally takes you from 2020 and just drops you into this time period. And you are just immersed in the world of filmmaking at that time. That being said, it's not necessarily all about filmmaking. It's the story about kind of how Mankiewicz, the character Oldman plays, comes to tell this story in Citizen Kane. And for me, I think one of the beauties of what Fincher has done here is it's pure immersion. Fincher had took me into his world, and I was there. I mean, the Reznor and Atticus Ross's score, cinematography-wise, I thought Oldman disappeared in the role. I think it's interesting because it gave me a deeper appreciation of what Citizen Kane is. I mean, Citizen Kane for me is not a film that I think that I absolutely love, but I admire. I find the story behind it to be very interesting. I think it's a movie that, for me, atmosphere is such a key thing that I'm noticing in cinema this year. And when a director is able to bring you into a world and forget where you are and immerse you, again, we can dive into the technical stuff later on, but I think the mono soundtrack is brilliant. It sounded like a 1940s film. I love the crackling of the dialogue. The way the movie sounded was as if a record player could play a Fincher movie. Like if a record player was spinning a movie and then the visuals were something that you could imagine, and that's that crackling sound, that sound of a record, that's how Mank sounded to me. It was comforting. It was weirdly comforting because it's not really a comforting film from a perspective of storytelling, but I felt like I was in the time period that this film was made, and to be transported back that far in history and to actually have it revolve around arguably one of the most famous movies ever made. It was cool. I really enjoyed the experience. I thought it was wonderful. Love the film.
Jake, where you at?
I also really liked it, but right now I think for me it falls into that respect it more than I love it kind of thing. It has stuck with me, which is a big X factor for me in terms of how I end up feeling about a movie. And so I will say that I have still thought about it. It feels like a senior film study class, in that it could be truly fascinating, but it's also assuming that you have a certain foundational knowledge of not just Citizen Kane, but the Hollywood system of that time. I mean, like Kevin, you're right in that it is immersive, but I would argue almost immersive to a fault, in that there is no, and the opposite of what Chicago 7 did. Like Chicago 7 was very much a here are all these people, and here's who they are, and here's what they do, and here's how they play into things. Mank was very much a you don't know who these people are, then what the fuck are you doing watching this movie? Like it really kind of assumes that you know. It assumes that you know
Joseph Mankiewicz,
a lot of people, and the
Louis
story,
B. Mayer, and people like that.
It assumes that you've I would argue, I know a lot of my friends have never seen Citizen Kane. I would tell them that this movie is going to mean nothing to them if they haven't seen Citizen Kane. I think you need to have seen and understand and remember Citizen Kane to get anything out of Mank. Am I wrong about that?
I would argue that if the comparison we're bringing up with Chicago 7 and Mank, I think Chicago 7 is almost too on the nose and too melodramatic in that sense where it's like overly stating it. I think, see, it's funny you say that. Like, Mank was a film that the actual struggle to understand the world was part of the immersive process for me. Does that make sense? So, like, you know, when we're meeting a character, I didn't need a Chiron to come up and tell me this is
sure,
but you walk into MGM and the conversation is what fills that in. And I think that, yes, don't get me wrong, I didn't know every person I was watching on the screen, but to me, it was almost as if I was in the 40s or 30s, whatever that was, whatever that was, because it took place in the 30s,
early
specifically.
40s.
Yeah, right. Because well, Citizen Kane came out in 41, so it must have been 30s. It had to have been the 30s. So I guess my point being is that, like, I felt like Fincher took me and just dropped me into the time period and said, "Enjoy." Learn, like it's like you walk through it and you're like, who's that? Oh, cool, that guy did that. Oh, I don't know. For me, it was like I was there. That's kind of what, like, I felt like I was on the bed with Oldman writing that script. I felt like, and I thought Lily Collins was great. I thought Seyfried was great. Charles Dance was great, and it was cool to me. I didn't know a bunch about William Randolph Hearst, a ton about him, like, so it was cool to kind of get that fill in. And now I kind of want to go back and watch Citizen Kane now. I think it gives it context. I think it might help me appreciate the film on a deeper level.
All right, we will absolutely be discussing Mank as we get further through the rest of this year. It's coming to theaters, limited theaters on... Wait, is it limited theaters now and then December 4th on Netflix?
Friday, limited theaters, yeah, and then...
Okay, cool. So you guys will be able to start seeing Fincher's new film very soon. Last week, we had Vince Vaughn on the show, and he was promoting Freaky. Freaky is now coming to theaters. It's opening, appropriately enough, on Friday the 13th. It is a body swap horror comedy. I wrote the review for SeanConneryBlend. You can go read my full rundown of it there. My takeaway from it was that I thought, sadly, it wasted the concept of the body swap. I thought that... It came up with that idea, and it was like, hey, what if we did a body swap where it was a serial killer and a teenage girl? And that sounds promising, especially for a Blumhouse type film where they keep the expenses down, but they amp the gore, and it does have a couple of really cool kills in it, 2 or 3 at least, that are highly original. But outside of just like, wouldn't it be really funny to see Vince Vaughn playing a high school girl? I thought it kind of dropped the ball in terms of the places that it could have gone with it, and especially right off the bat. The initial scene to me, looked like a really great homage to like 80s slasher horror films, and I thought the movie was going to keep that vibe all the way through, and I thought it missed the mark a bit. So I was kind of stunned to see that this movie has 91% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. I thought that that's pretty generous. I like Christopher Landon. He did the 2 Happy Death Day films. I think both of them are really creative. I thought that this one was less below the level of what those 2 films are. Anyway.
I agree with you. Yeah. I thought it was a totally wasted, which is like, it's a great premise, but I feel like it was totally wasted and it feels like it doesn't really understand what makes either of those 2 great genres work. And so it's a weird gray area in between, because it feels like it's not brave enough to swing one way or the other and really be one of those type of films, or try to manage to somehow be both. So it's somewhere in the gray area. It felt much more neuter than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I thought one of the problems with it too is that once you take on the body swap formula, there's certain scenes you feel like you have to go through. Like, they have to wake up in the other person's body and be shocked. So as we were going through it, I was like, oh, do we have to go through each of these moments? So I don't know, it felt like it sort of dragged from that aspect. Kev?
I liked it a little bit more than you guys. I definitely don't think it's a great film. It was passably fun. I do think you're right. I think some of the concept or the conceptual elements are a little... It feels a little like puzzle pieces, like this is what this movie has to be, so we have to, like you said, we have to do these scenes. But that being said, I thought that Kathryn Newton's performance was great. I thought the way she plays the serial killer, the dead eyes that she has, I thought you got to give her credit. That was a good performance on her part. Vince Vaughn, I don't necessarily think Vince Vaughn. I think it could have been anybody. I don't think it had to be Vince Vaughn. And I love Vince Vaughn. I rewatched Wedding Crashers recently. He has such a great presence on screen. I just didn't necessarily think. Now there are times where he's playing it's like Jack Black in Jumanji when he's playing the teenage girl. You know what I mean? That stuff is funny. Like when Vince Vaughn is trying to, the characters inside his body and he's like playing with that aspect of it. I will say one of the terrifying things about this film that really scared me, and I think they should have played into it a little bit more, was the concept of a young girl going to high school and inside her body is a serial killer. And the sense of nobody around knowing that. And like you have a murderer on the loose walking through your school. I mean, remember that scene in the beginning of the film after they switch, she's in the kitchen with her sister and she almost stabs her sister.
Yeah.
And it was like that stuff is like that. It, to me, is genuinely terrifying because the audience knows something that the characters don't. But at the same time, you have to think about it. That's no longer Kathryn Newton. She does not think that that's her sister. So this person could brutally just murder anybody. And I think that is the root of the scary element of the film.
You're right. I kind of wish they would have explored
and
that.
And they don't embrace that.
That needed to be embraced more.
Yeah. It was more about, isn't it so funny to see Vince Vaughn act like a teenage girl?
I think there is something
Damn it, now you're making me want to see that movie.
Like, that's terrifying. I mean, you have to think about, like, you're seeing this teenage girl walk through school, and there is not an ounce of her left in that moment. It's a serial killer. It's a guy. It's a person who has absolutely no regard for anybody. I will say some of the kills are very clever. But again, it's like. As I get older, Sean, and we discussed this before, I'm just over watching violence like that. Yeah. I mean, I was watching something the other day, and I'm 36 now, and I'm like, I don't know that I like this over violence anymore. I'm like, I've gotten a little turned off by it. I don't know if it's
you turn on Quentin.
Well, no, it's not, because Tarantino does it in such a comical way. It's different. It's more of like
context matters.
Yeah, it's context, but also I feel like this year has really set people in a different mindset with what they're wanting to consume, and I think. But Freaky is fun, so it's not like Freaky is not like a hostile movie. It's fun.
I'll even say this much, because it's coming to theaters. It's in limited theaters, and while I didn't love it, I kind of want to go and support it. Like it feels like the kind of movie that I want to go to, and buy a ticket and show support and let people know that. That the movie theaters can operate safely. I know that the theaters have been dying for some type of content, no pun intended, and now they're getting a horror film, that's going to be about stalking people and murdering teenagers, but in a playful way, in a Blumhouse kind of way. And
I'd give it like a 3 out of 5, 3.5 out of 5. I mean, I think I liked it a little bit more than you guys did. I think there was some aspects of it that I found entertaining. It's an hour and a half. It worked for me in some aspects, but I actually don't disagree with any of your criticisms.
All right, we're going to keep Fatman brief because we've been heavy Fatman in this week's episode.
Title without laughing.
We've been talking about this film now. We've been sort of raving about it. It is really great in the fact that it keeps it really grounded. It takes a totally bizarre premise of a kid hiring an assassin to go kill Santa Claus to a whole nother level. And really, he does it just because he gets coal one year for Christmas. Like, he's that annoyed that he hires an assassin to kill Santa Claus. The fact that the Santa Claus is played by Mel Gibson, it was great to hear the Nelms brothers talk about the day that they found out Mel Gibson was going to be in the film. This feels like one of those movies that would be flying under the radar, but we've been so desperate for content that it's getting a lot of attention now, and I hope more people do check it out, so I would highly recommend Fatman. Kev, anything else you wanted to throw in about it?
Yeah, I liked it. I mean, I think Walton Goggins might be one of the most underrated actors of our time. Like, that guy is just incredible. I mean, obviously he's brilliant in Tarantino's films and Hateful Eight. I mean, he's just an incredible
Justified,
actor.
If you've never seen Justified.
He has to play scenes in this movie, too, that are so off the wall surreal, and he plays them so seriously.
Right. It's so interesting. Like, to me, I find tone to be one of the hardest things for a filmmaker to nail. And when you have Goggins doing the stuff that Sean is referring to, there are some scenes that are just so ridiculous, but he plays them so straight. Like, he plays them so... It's so unassuming. It's as if this is just how normal life is for this guy. Like,
he sells it.
It's not acting. And I think there's a really That's a really underrated aspect of filmmaking is tone. Because if you strike the right tone, you can have a movie that feels grounded and feels absurd at the same time, like a Zombieland, right? Like a Zombieland where it's insanely absurd, but you care about the characters. And I think that's why the Nelms were saying in our interview that they had to direct a film that could show somebody what their tone was so that they could sell Fatman.
It's kind of like, remember when Barry Sonnenfeld told us that when he was directing Tommy Lee Jones in Men in Black, he had to tell him, don't act as if you're in don't try to be funny. Don't act as if you're in a comedy, and then it will be funny. He had to get him to play it dramatically, really. Right. And that's why Tommy Lee Jones is so funny in Men in Black, because he plays it so straight.
Yeah.
Which, that's kind of what, you play it, you don't direct a comedy by going, all right, guys, be funny. You play it down.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
and that's
true.
exactly what Goggins does. Like Goggins, you just believe that this guy is this guy. And
Mel too.
Gibson's
the way that Mel
great.
approaches Santa Claus.
Oh yeah, Gibson's Santa Claus is so great because it's like a business transaction. It's such an interesting concept. Like he's hired by the government, like he works for the Treasury or whatever it was, and he's working with the military to help. It makes sense. With the mythology of Santa Claus and that concept. You buy into it for some weird reason.
For a large chunk of the movie, they only call him Chris. And there's one point where the government says to him, this isn't spoilers, it's still pretty early on, where the government says look, Chris, we really love your holiday cheer too. It benefits us as well too from a financial standpoint. As long as people are invested in the season, we're all doing well together. Yeah. And I'm like, is this guy really Santa Claus or is he crazy? What is going on here? I couldn't figure it out, and I love it. That's what they do so well. So
also, and last thing on this movie is Gibson's arc in this film was very interesting. It kind of reminded me of Gibson himself in regard the idea that the character keeps saying, "I've lost my influence," and the idea of people remembering my work and things like that. And I think it's an interesting concept because. We are such a recency effect society. Everything is so recent, right? What did this person do recently? And I feel like we're getting further and further away of forgetting the history of movies and the history of performances and things like that. And I do wonder, and I didn't ask him this because he was paired with two other people, but I would love to have gotten his opinion on, does he feel like he's lost his influence? Does he feel like people have forgotten about Braveheart and Lethal Weapon and it's an interesting thing as actors. Costner's another example. I was thinking about this the other day. Costner's have people forgotten about his influence? And I just find it interesting how recent we are as a society. I don't think we look back enough anymore.
Well, I feel like, Kevin, you and I kind of run into that sometimes with our jobs, not to get too into the weeds, but I know that sometimes my producers, I would get jacked over having Sophia Loren. I know she's in a new movie. I would kill for a Sophia Loren interview, but my producers would much rather have Lil Nas X. They would rather have someone that's today relevant, doing stuff today that's modern, as opposed to I want to talk to the person that's been working for 50 years. It's a different viewpoint. So I get what you're saying.
But we are in an age where the movie star is essentially not a factor anymore in regards to people going to a movie.
So replaced. Yeah, they've been replaced.
Think about the 90s. Think about when a Mel Gibson movie would come out or a Costner movie would come out or a
Tom Hanks.
Yeah, I mean,
Jim Carrey. Yeah,
it's fascinating. I think especially Costner. I think those guys missed that. To
be fair, Mel shot himself in the foot a couple of times.
Well,
from a publicity standpoint.
Yeah. So just to clarify, my comments are more on the career, not the outside of the career stuff.
For sure.
But
yes. Mel could have stayed very successful for a very long period of time, but he went a little gonzo, which makes him interesting as a screen person because you don't know what to expect from him. And as a director too, when he turns in something like Apocalypto, you don't really know what to get from him. So
yeah. I think Mel Gibson might be one of the nerdiest guys on the planet. Remember the Nelms were talking about how geeky he was about lenses and editing. That dude loves filmmaking. He and Hacksaw Ridge is
he's a great director.
If you haven't seen it.
All right, let's get to speaking of looking back on a legacy of Hollywood icons. This week's blend game is SeanConneryBlend, obviously chosen because we recently lost him, and we've been reflecting on his career as a whole, and we ended up running a piece on Cinema Blend, which was Sean Connery roles that prove that he is a icon outside of the James Bond franchise. And I mean, it was just, you forget the sheer amount of amazing films that he's been in over the years. There are actors who would love to have one or two of them. If you told an actor, hey, you're going to be remembered for The Hunt for Red October, they would say, thank you.
Cool.
Thank you. That's amazing.
Ain't mad about it.
Yeah. And Connery has got so many underneath his belt. So, Jake, I'm going to start with you. Where did you go when choosing your favorites? Because I'm pretty sure I know where Kevin's going to go.
I think I know where Kevin's going to go too. I went with the sort of what was my introduction to Sean Connery as a kid, which is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
There you go.
I mean,
Best one.
We're talking. Well, I would say Raiders and Last Crusade are both 10. So like it's splitting hairs. But look, it's Indiana Jones is already one of the probably, I would say, top 5 greatest movie characters in the history of cinema. So it says a lot that you can add another character who makes him better.
Yeah.
Like
right.
Sean Connery makes Harrison Ford better in The Last Crusade for so many reasons. He's so incredibly charming in that movie. He generally feels it feels natural that he would be the father of Indiana Jones. He's a perfect, I don't know if foil's the right word, but perfect to he brings a lot out of Harrison Ford, out of Indiana Jones. But probably, I was thinking a lot about sort of like the great moments of his career, of all of his films. And the one that I kept going back to was when at the very end of the film, in the climax, when Indiana Jones he's hanging on to the ledge and he's going to fall in the hole and he's trying to get the Holy Grail, and Sean Connery, Dr. Henry Jones just says like Indiana, just let it go. Mm-hmm. And there's so many layers to that line about knowing when to let things go, and especially coming from him, who kind of like turned away Indy, his whole life. He always kind of left Indy behind so he could go off and do this and do that, and finally for him to step forward and realize and basically say, like, my son's life is more important than this thing I've been chasing after my entire life. I rewatched it after he passed, and it was it now it has more significance to it. And in fact, that was the role that I believe he said, if there were ever going to be a role that would have brought him out of retirement, it would have been that one. So I think that even to him, not saying it was his most important, not saying it was his favorite role, but it seems like it held a special significance to him as well.
I don't think that we ever put enough emphasis on the fact that Sean Connery walked into that franchise, which was, an elite franchise, even at that level, with only 2 films, and created as captivating a character as he did. And it goes to show, not to throw Shia under the bus, but it's really hard to do.
Sure.
When you come in as the new guy, if you don't hit the tone right.
Sure.
But I kind of realize now, in you saying this, how much of that plays to how Harrison Ford let Sean Connery, because in 2 movies prior to that, Indiana Jones is the coolest MF in the room, right? And in Crusade, he's the son, who's constantly has to be like
Junior.
Yeah, and he's just humbled. And if Harrison Ford doesn't agree to do that, it doesn't work,
100%.
right? He has to play the opposite side of the coin for the duration of it.
Where like Harrison's kind of like flirting with a woman, and then Sean Connery implies that he already slept with her?
He says she talks in her sleep.
She talks in her sleep.
Yeah. And again, all that dynamic doesn't work if Harrison Ford doesn't allow it. But Connery is cooler than cool in that film and is unbelievable. So, Kev, I'm pretty sure I know where you're going. But
I feel like this is obvious. The Rock. I mean, no question.
It's not wrong.
I can't argue. That's a great choice.
Michael Bay. But I also have a very distinct memory of seeing The Rock. So I remember my dad. We went to AMC Patrick Henry in Newport News, Virginia. My mom, my dad, my brother, and I went. So it was 96, I think was that movie. So I was 12. My brother was 10. And so I think I've told you guys this story before, but I'll never forget. Like, I could see it heavily. Like, you walk up to the box office window. It was in the middle of a mall. And I remember my dad asking for 4 tickets, 2 adults, 2 kids for The Rock. And he was like, "Can I speak to a manager, please?" And this manager walks around, and my dad goes over, and he's like, and I asked him later on what he said. He goes, he wanted to ask the manager if there was any sex scenes in the film, like there, so they could like block my brother and I's eyes. You can watch all the violence you want, but
yeah, we can shove that little green ball into the guy's mouth and watch his freaking face melt. Oh yeah,
that's fine. So no, I just remember, I'll never forget, I can see my dad asking that question. I can see my dad and mom covering our eyes during the Nicolas Cage sex scene in the beginning of the film where he has with
it's like right off the bat. They just get it out of the way.
Yeah. Isn't it like a religious, it was like a religious thing. Like they were like the sequence was
are they
like
trying to have a baby? I think they're trying to have a baby.
It had something to do with her religion, and they had to like, it's something, I can't remember the specifics of that scene, but I remember because my eyes were covered.
Because you've never seen it.
Yeah, I still cover my eyes today. I still haven't seen the scene. No, but and then that film just came on the screen, and I was like, I mean, this was my first Michael Bay experience, right? Because I mean, I was too young to see Bad Boys at that point. I had never like that. Remember that whole era of Bruckheimer and Simpson, Simpson, and that lightning bolt.
Oh yeah.
There was nothing like that. Was such an iconic. That might have been the first time I saw that, because that from that point forward, that, and then when you would see the Dimension logo, you knew something was going to be good.
Shit was going down.
Right, and The Rock was like such a. It's so interesting because when I was 12. I feel like the 12-year-old me who watched it still watches it the way I do at 36. It was just like such an insane action movie. And I'm trying to remember now if I have this timeline wrong or right. But my parents took us to San Francisco to Alcatraz when we were kids.
Wow.
I've always wanted to go.
Funny enough, Sean, you'll appreciate this. When we were in San Francisco that weekend, this is all revolving around the Rock, I guess. My dad took me to a music store to buy me Enema of the State, which was Blink-182's album at the time.
Nice.
And so I guess that would give us the indication if that trip was before or after The Rock. What year did that album come out? I don't remember
97, I want to say.
If it was
so, it might have been right after.
So
might have been after.
Can someone confirm that? Because if that's the case,
I'm looking.
Okay,
99. I'm on it. Came out June 1st, 1999.
Then that's perfect.
Oh, 99.
Wow.
So that means when I was in San Francisco at that point, I had already seen The Rock. So going to Alcatraz with my family was a big deal for me as a kid because I'd seen The Rock. Now think about it this way: I'm walking through Alcatraz. I'm trying to remember the specifics of it. We went into the famous cell where who was the gangster that was very big time gangster who was there?
Capone? Al Capone?
Was Capone in
No, I don't think Capone ever went to Alcatraz.
It was somebody else. But all I remember is going...
No, I thought Capone was in Alcatraz.
Was he?
Yeah.
Might have been,
I'm pretty sure he was.
But like they take you to the tour and you get to go into the cells. Remember in the movie, they lock them in the cells? Like that's what happens in the film. That's what Ed Harris does.
Yeah.
They lock the tourists in the cells.
Yeah.
So just that whole experience, I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but it's just the memories I have of that film, specifically.
Wait, I want to bring you back specifically, though. Do you like Connery in that film?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm completely on a tangent with The Rock. Sorry.
I mean, I know you love The Rock as a whole, but do you love Connery in that movie?
And the reason why I chose the movie is because it was genuinely the first time I really fell in love with Connery as an actor. I was 12, so I mean, like I had seen the Indiana Jones films, but seeing an R-rated film and seeing like the prom queen line, and like there was just so many like details about that performance that were so great. My favorite scene in that film, though, is one of my favorite scenes in the film is the scene he has with his daughter. It's after this like gigantic car chase, and he sits down in this quiet sequence, and it's the girl from Mallrats, the girl who's dating. I'm trying to remember her name off the top of my head.
Claire Forlani? Is it Claire Forlani?
Maybe. I'm trying to remember her name, but she plays Connery's daughter in the film. And it's like this sweet moment they have before they enter into The Rock.
Oh, God, now you're making me want to watch The Rock.
The Rock
I want to watch it too.
But Connery's so brilliant. The presence he has in that film, I love him and Nick Cage's chemistry. But to me, like that is my quintessential Sean Connery film. It's like the long hair at first, and he's clean cut. He's back at The Rock. Is the only one.
Do you like your haircut?
Yeah, I love that movie. So yeah, I know I went off on a tangent, but forgive me.
There have been a bunch of stories obviously that have come out since his passing. But did you see the story talking about like star power that Bruckheimer shared about The Rock with Connery? They fell a few days behind schedule. And Buena Vista, who's Disney, a few producers came down and they basically were going to start cutting the budget. They came down to set to like see what was going on and why it was falling behind, and they were going to cut the budget. And Connery basically yelled at them that they didn't know how good they had it and how good this movie was going to be, and just kind of scared them off so they wouldn't cut the budget. So that's star power.
Good for him.
James Bond
That's awesome.
tells you to fuck off. You.
All right. Well, then that's to go that route, because I kind of assumed you were going to do The Rock, which would have been one of my choices. I had to go with the James Bond film because he's so seminal. You know, he's the defining James Bond. And if I'm going to choose my favorite James Bond of his era, I went Goldfinger. Goldfinger, to me, it's the third Bond film. It's when the franchise really hit its mark, figured out exactly the types of stories that it wants to tell. I like when Bond films have adventures that sort of ground them in the U.S., and this has a Fort Knox aspect to it. Has Odd Job, first introduction of Odd Job, which is James Bond going up against a weird sort of henchman that lives in that universe. I think it was Connery at his most comfortable with that. Obviously, it's got so many great images that are time tested for the Bond franchise. The character painted gold. You had a Bond girl, an actual character in a movie named Pussy Galore. Like they were just like, why not?
How old were you when that movie came out?
Oh, no, I saw it years later. I think it came out in the 60s, so I wasn't.
Okay.
I wasn't.
So were you
Jeez,
like 15?
Jesus,
15,
Jake.
20?
I was at least 25 by that point. But that was one of the first Bond films that Connery was in that I was going back to revisit. I was like, oh, this is actually an entertaining movie. Like sometimes they were a little dated and they were trying to find their way through. But I thought they really started to click with Goldfinger, and I wanted to pick a Bond franchise. But Michelle Garist and Lydia Mascoro and Philippe Carrier and many more went with Last Crusade. I feel like that's a seminal. Now, this is my time when I tell you guys that I'm a Temple of Doom guy. And I think it's between Raiders and Temple of Doom.
Temple of Doom.
I love
Temple of Doom is
Doom.
fantastic. Yeah, it's
Temple
amazing.
of Doom, Jake.
Why is Jake making that face?
That's why this is a better trilogy than Back to the Future. Anyway, I'm
But that's actually
Raiders.
not.
No, Raiders is a better
far
trilogy
off.
than Back to the Future.
Back to the Future is better than Indiana Jones.
no.
It is.
We don't have
It just
time to
is.
do
Okay,
that.
you want a hot take? I got a hot take for you.
science.
There's only one good Back to the Future movie.
No, that's not
Well,
true.
That's absolutely
that is
absurd.
just not true.
And also, we can't say Indiana Jones is a trilogy anymore because it's not a trilogy anymore.
You know
But-
what we
but
mean
like
by
those
it.
three
I know. In the
films
same way,
are.
I get it. Trust me,
Yeah.
I'd still Star Wars is a trilogy. even
That's
though
being
it's-
persnickety. You got the
I love you saying that word.
such a great word.
Such a great word.
But I honestly, I think Temple of Doom is actually the best opening of all the
Oh,
Indiana
I hate
Jones
that
films.
opening. I hate that opening.
I love the opening. All right.
Todd and Rocaine Alzier
Club
and Indy
Obi-Wan.
Christina, they all went with The Rock. And then John Palmer chose another tremendous Sean Connery film, The Untouchables, which, again, perfect example of Kevin Costner is supposed to be the lead of that film. He's Elliot freaking Ness. And Robert De Niro is Al Capone. And they both get the show stolen from them by Sean Connery's
I gotta be honest
gangster.
with you, dude. I don't like The Untouchables.
Oh, it's amazing. It's
I think
amazing,
it's
and you're
super
wrong.
cheesy.
No. It's amazing, and you're wrong.
I think it's super cheesy.
Gabe has a really good one for next week. He's having us play hashtag Diablo Cody Blend. Really
Oh,
good. That's
a
interesting.
great
That's
one.
interesting.
Yeah, as soon as I read that, I thought that's going to be a really fun one. So
Where
we're
the
gonna
hell did
play-
that come from?
I know where that came from.
It's Adam Brody
Brody.
mentioned it, and then I just did a story. I was just reading a story with Megan Fox talking about Jennifer Spotty as well, and I was like, oh, that's great. We don't do enough screenwriters, I feel like.
True. And
she's
she's
a great one.
absolutely of the level that like you can debate her contributions.
Yeah, I mean, she's relatively young career, given a lot of the people that we talk about.
Yeah.
But they're all she's great
right.
work.
Diablo Cody Blend. So you can let us know your pick on social media or at ReelBlend@CinemaBlend.com. Be sure to drop us a review. You can also put them on the Apple Podcast, or you can send us an email at ReelBlend@CinemaBlend.com. And we are going to be getting out of here right now to go do our next premium episode. Boys, it is another This or That episode.
Oh, those are fun.
And the This or That is going to be for the genre
I
of
love these.
science fiction. Science fiction, This or That.
I've
on
seen
the Real
science
Blend
fiction films.
premium episodes. So, for people who are following us over there, you guys will be able to enjoy that. The rest of you guys will be back next week with a brand new episode. In the meantime, follow us on social media at Jake's Takes, at Kevin McCarthy TV, and at Sean_O'Connell.
Also, Gabe has social media too.
Gabe also has social media at Gabe Kovac. I like the
Kovacs.
best.
It looks like Kovacs though, so it's.
But it looks like Kovacs, so spell it out that way. But it's pronounced Kovacs, you savages. And we'll see you next week. Until then,
Hubie!
No.
I will reinstate
quit this
Dunkirk
show.
if I have to before we do.
Until we get the director of Hubie Halloween on the show, we will say that.
Hubie!